Good morning, Minnesota. It's the super mega panel you all have been waiting for. I got a couple housekeeping items real quick, so hold tight. I got to figure out a screen share. Watch the old guy try to share a screen. It's my weekly comedy routine. Here we go. Minnesota 16th Annual 2020 Office Summit. These events have been well attended for a long time. This was a horrible thing for us to have to do this one online. We had hoped to be through COVID by December and be able to have this event in person, but what the heck, let's just have 42 people on a panel and we can do this thing. Special thanks to our sponsors here. When we had to pivot to virtual events and then we went to hybrid events and now we're back to virtual, we couldn't do any of that. It's very time consuming, expensive, and a technical trick to get it done. And without these sponsors, we could have never made that happen. What I'm showing you on my screen right now is our virtual lobby. You probably came in here to find this event and watch it. But go back here and it's got lots of good information. This is where I'm scrolling down. You'll be able to see all of our speakers today. I'm in the wrong lobby. So I'm going to fix that before the next panelist, but you can see below each speaker, you'll see a LinkedIn button. So if it's somebody you don't know or you want to learn more about, click that LinkedIn. You can find out what their bio is and connect with them on LinkedIn. So it's a little way to at least be able to network a little bit during this virtual environment. I am going to duck out of the way. Russ, if you need me, if anybody else needs me, because Russ can't figure out how to work his speakers, just say, hey, Todd, I need you. But I am just going to disappear for the remainder of this conversation. Good luck, gentlemen. Away we go.
Thank you, Todd. Thanks to Jeff Johnson. It's my pleasure today to be the moderator for an 11-person distinguished panel. And I want to thank all of them. When I asked to submit questions they wanted answered or issues addressed, every one of them responded. And I really appreciate that. We gave Steve Chirhart a hard time because he submitted 14 questions, but they're really good. So thank you, Steve. Anyway, a little background on myself. First of all, I was thrilled when Jeff Johnson called me to be moderator of the Downtown Minneapolis Summit a few months ago. And now this, it makes me feel like I'm not completely irrelevant yet. So that was a nice gesture. I think it's also because sometimes when I'm moderator, I'm not the #1 rule follower. So we try to make it entertaining, fun, but at the end informative. And I hope you'll find that today. I retired at the end of 17, very active with my firm, NTH, on some of the major transactions in the office area, US Bank headquarters lease, Health Partners headquarters lease, the new XL building, the 5-block sale for Star Tribune were all part of what I was very much involved with. Our project management team were involved with the Ordway and the Orchestra Hall project. And I was proud too to be involved and still very involved with the Downtown Council. They're all in now with all the public safety issues. And I was involved in creating the DID. I give hats off to my former partners, Tina Hoy and Anna Koskren and Paul Johnson, who heads the project management. And I do like to stay close to the industry. One thing, I know Tony Bronco knows this, but he was my guest speaker. I started a mentorship program this fall for the University of St. Thomas for 12 undergraduates. And we meet every other week, 45-minute sessions. It's been fantastic. And we're going to do a second round in next semester. It's really great. These are kids most majoring in finance and real estate at St. Thomas. And I'm also one of 3 people appointed by the Board of Regents of the University of Minnesota to represent them on the East Gateway project led by the foundation. So I'm keeping my hand a bit in the real estate arena, but in a different fashion than full-time work, which you all get to do. So here we go. Here's what I'm going to do. We're going to go through, and we do have 11 panelists. So I'm going to start off with our first panelist, and that panelist is Bob Pfefferle. Bob is managing director at Hines, and his current focus is development, and in particular, the North Loop Green Mixed Use Project. The question for Bob to start this off is, Hines is a national and global firm. Are you seeing or hearing anything trending beyond our market that differs from what we are experiencing in the Twin Cities? Bob?
Thanks, Russ. First of all, I want to just, thank you again for coming out of retirement and hosting or moderating the panel. I don't know that I've ever done one of these where you weren't the moderator. So it's great to have you back, and glad you're leading this distinguished crew today. To your question, you know, I have the benefit of sitting on Hines has a global call on a weekly basis, so I get to hear in real time what's happening, you know, across the world. And you know, it's pretty clear from our associates in the Asian markets like China and South Korea and Japan and Taiwan that almost all of the commercial real estate sectors are back or getting back to what we would kind of think of as normal. And as things move east to like Eastern Europe and Western Europe and then to the Americas, you know, it's really been dictated, you know, how they're all doing based on how well the governments in those countries are, you know, have control of the virus. And, you know, when I say control of the virus, it's also the ability to minimize, you know, track and minimize the spread. So in this country, well, and that's to say then, you know, I think it's, you know, a logical conclusion is when people feel safe, you know, to go back to work, you know, they've been going back to work, and we saw it was ticking up in the European countries. That's kind of gone back now because of some hot spots that have been opening up. But what we're seeing in the Twin Cities, you know, just on an office basis, just to focus on that for a second, you know, is that it's pretty consistent with what we've been seeing, you know, elsewhere around the country. Our office buildings we track, you know, on a weekly, monthly basis. You know, we get some reports out there that, you know, for, you know, CBD projects, you know, it's been typically 8 to 15% of people, you know, coming into the office. Some have been a little higher at times. You know, it's ticking a little bit lower again right now because of the outbreak. And then in suburban properties, it's more like high teens, low 20s, but it really hasn't breached that with the, you know, few exceptions out there for some, you know, corporate headquarters in some southern states that we've seen. Other things that we've seen that I think are pretty consistent. So, you know, within our country, I don't think the Twin Cities is an outlier, and it's pretty consistent. Transactions from an office standpoint are really largely frozen, but for short-term renewals. You know, companies are looking for maximum flexibility in the next 24 to 36 months. And looking at this panel, a lot of you probably remember, you know, 2011 to 2014, where we were seeing that same sort of, you know, thing that occurred with short-term, you know, deals being done till they could, you know, figure out, you know, what the next step needed to be. And I'm sure we'll get into more of that as the panel goes on. The other things, you know, amenity wars are really turning, you know, and being replaced more with health and wellness wars. And that's probably the wrong term, but it's back to that same idea. When people feel, you know, safe and secure going back to work, and you got to do that in multiple ways. And the health and wellness is becoming a much bigger piece of that in the recruitment and retention of employees and people strategically thinking about how they're getting people back to work. And again, I'm sure we'll talk more about that. One other thing that I just wanted to mention that we're hearing and seeing from brokers as we've talked to them across the country, and, you know, I talk with my associates in the various regions, is that, you know, the expectation in talking to corporate leaders, et cetera, is, you know, there'll be a major flight to quality with newer modern buildings, you know, probably having the advantage just because of the technology associated with, you know, significant touchless access, fresh air, you know, improved HVAC, outdoor spaces, things that, you know, some of the existing older stock will have a hard time probably being able to implement. So I'll stop there because I know we've got, you know, a lot of panelists with a lot to say, and then hopefully once we move through, we'll circle back on some other details. Thanks, Russ.
Thanks, Pfeff. Great start. Now my fellow Badger booster, Jimmy Freytag. Your son still playing the hockey? Is he senior now?
Oh, Russ, time has flown by. He has graduated.
Oh, wow. Well, it was a great run. Jim is Senior Vice President, Institutional Agency Advisory and Transaction Services at CBRE. And kind of the opening questions for Jim are, how are tenants using space and planning to use space given the current pandemic? And what is the current utilization of office space by tenants? Is there a difference between the downtown and suburbs? Quite timely question. Jimmy, take it away.
Well, thanks, Russ. And it's great to see you and great to see everybody this morning. And, you know, this question and what tenants are doing, what I've seen, the tenants that we're, you know, working with, talking with, it's all over the board. And there's not a clear trend that we've seen where things are going to go. We have seen tenants that have a fair amount of space. They've got near-term lease expirations. They don't know what the office is going to look like on the other side of this. And they've elected to let their leases lapse and continue working from home. Some of those were planning on relocating to change their location. So they've just kind of hit that pause button, and with technology, they're able to stay from home, which is unfortunate, I think, for our market, because you're going to lose that occupancy. But then to the other extreme, we've had tenants who are planning their space. And when you look at their fit plan, they're doing some right sizing because maybe they haven't had a lease come up and, you know, be able to right size, because now they're still doing the same, but just with less people. And you look at their fit plan and you're going, this is 2018 or 2019. They're still densely packed in, you know, and there doesn't seem to be any social distancing factored into their fit plan. And then we've also seen tenants that they've got 100 people in their office, they've got 10 people coming in, and their lease is coming up, and they don't know what to do. And they're like, how do we sign another 5-year lease and spend $1 million a year on rent for 5 people coming in? And so those tenants are trying to find short-term solutions, to Bob's point earlier. Perhaps it's a spec suite somewhere or a shorter-term sublease that they can have a touchdown space and be able to operate out of that location. We have seen a little more activity in the sense of tours in the suburbs. You know, downtown, we've been having some tours, but not as much activity. And another interesting trend, I don't know if it's a fad, a number of tenants that are in the market that are smaller, more in, say, the 5 to 15, 20,000 square foot range. One of the things that's on their mind is, can we find a building we can purchase? You know, and is that a factor being driven by, we can control our access, interest rates are very favorable, and we can maybe put our money to work that way and find good opportunities. And there aren't a lot of great opportunities in that category. So again, it's kind of all over the map. We've even seen other companies more national, international in scope, that when they're out looking for space, they're kind of, you know, looking for space in a business as usual and just marching forward. Now, we haven't seen a lot of transactions done. There haven't been a lot of data points to prove to here's what's going to be that trend, but everybody's trying to figure it out. Matter of fact, had a tour yesterday in a space, and comment made by one of the principals looking at the space was like, yeah, we're trying to figure it out. What are we going to look like on the other side of this? How much space do we really need? We know our head count, but what should the workplace look like? And that's the big question that I think a lot of companies have. And hopefully that will all get sorted out sooner rather than later as we march forward.
That's great, Jim. Thank you. It reminds me of a quote that in my own personal life recently, I think many of you know, I lost my wife in August of 51 years of marriage. And you know, that's why after that, being able to reach out and stay connected is so important. And one of the phrases I like is, in the face of uncertainty, hope is as reasonable alternative as despair. And I think that applies to the real estate market. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty. And also, I would say, which Jim alluded to, is that in that uncertainty often comes creativity and new solutions. And that's kind of exciting, actually. So now, Steve Chirhart, Steve, a principal at TaTonka Real Estate Advisors, kind of lumping 3 key questions and all somewhat related. With COVID-19 accelerating the work from home model, what impact will this have on office space demand over the next 3 to 5 years? And then with that, are there different worker groups impacted positively or negatively by this remote strategy? And how does this affect their productivity or desire to return to the office? And finally, in terms of key issues coming back to the office, how do you rank safety, security, COVID, and public transportation? Steve, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Russ. Well, first of all, I think what COVID has done is accelerate a lot of our use of adapting technologies that have given us increased productivity and flexibility to work from home that had never been really tested or proven before. And I think, as we look at the market today, there's no question that people are not going to go back even after COVID and use space exactly as they used to use it. As Jim alluded to, I think we will see maybe a loosening of some of the densities, maybe more private offices. We're going to see maybe less collaboration areas, at least in the short term. And if the number of subleases that have already begun to hit the market are any indication of where the demand for space is going, it's clear that we're going to see increased vacancy rates. And I think that it's still going to take time to determine what that impact is, but I think it could easily be, 2 or 3 or 4 percentage points on the vacancy side, which is significant. I also agree that, the 3 concerns that I think tenants have is safety and security. If you look at downtown Minneapolis or downtown St. Paul right now, with COVID maybe being number 2, and access to public transportation if you're in one of the core cities and relying on public transportation, buses and light rail for your employees to get to work. And without occupants spending time in their buildings and walking the streets and frequenting restaurants, there's just a lack of energy, which is, I think, the majority of the reason we have the increase in safety issues in downtown Minneapolis today. And until we get our people back to work and create that mass that gives us all a greater sense of security and our own policing efforts, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And I think a lot of the larger corporations are leading by example and not rushing their people back. There is concerns over what liability do we have as a corporation if we bring our people back and somebody does get sick or God forbid die. So we're going to see I think a very cautious approach to returning to the office. And the greatest news we have is here that we're on the edge of the vaccine and we have at least hope and we have light at the end of the tunnel. And, hopefully by the second half of 2021, at least we are beginning to see a return to normal. The retail establishments downtown are just suffering greatly. And I don't know if we'll see a recovery in that sector for years, but it's really sad to see. And tenants who are working there and residents who live there are concerned. We'll have a big decision on our police budget here coming in the next week or so, and we've never seen more opposition, both for and against police support, as we did the other night in the city council meeting and the hearing on this. In terms of how has it affected different workers, I think if you look at age categories, if you look at the 20-year-old to the 30-year-old worker, they want to go back to the office and, they miss their comrades. They're maybe less concerned about some of the health and safety issues of COVID. And they're learning by being with their coworkers and they feed off of that energy. And they also probably live in an apartment, most of them, and maybe have a roommate. So when you try to work from home, they're at a kitchen table, they're at a sofa in their living room or in their bedroom, and it's just not a conducive environment, especially if there's another person or other people that you're in that same environment with. If you take the, let's say, 30 to 50-year-olds or 30 to 45-year-olds, those are young families that may have children who are now impacted by the, stay at home, self-taught, distance learning. And my daughter and her husband are in that category with just a small child, our first grandchild. And it's a time consuming job. It's a full-time job just to watch Clara, and both of them work. And it has been extremely challenging. And, they took Clara out of daycare for quite a while and then put her back in this fall. And that's another piercing of the COVID veil, just with the exposure that she gets or that they get when they're going to pick her up at daycare. So, it's really challenging for some of the adult parents who are trying to work from home and balance distance learning and managing their children at the same time. And then for the older people like myself, if you're 50 or older, 60 or older, it's really been pretty surprising how much productivity we have gained in some instances. Not having to commute, not having to deal with parking, not having to deal with interruptions. We're working long days, but it's really a nice environment. And I've never spent this much time with my wife in 36 years of marriage. And, I said, we're either going to see a huge increase in birth rates or a spike in divorce rates. And I can at least say happily that it's been a positive for us to spend the time together. And, I've only been to our office downtown probably 4 or 5 occasions since March. And until we have a vaccine, being 62 and having asthma, I'm not likely to rush back either. So, I think it really means a lot of different things for people depending on where they're at in life. But I definitely see the way that we've accelerated our use of remote working and being able to work anywhere, not just you can be in your home in Arizona, your cabin up north, or your place in Florida and be as productive as you can from your home office here. So I think it's brought some elements into our workplace that will be with us forever. And I'm just hopeful that we get the vaccine sooner and we return to normal, because there's a lot of mental anguish that people are suffering by being disconnected and not being able to get together with their families and their friends and their coworkers and their clients. So and it's been a challenge in just connecting with people without knowing if they're at home at the office or where they are. So and I'm sure we'll touch on that later. So
Hey,
appreciate the
Steve,
question,
can,
Russ.
Steve, can I just clarify something? Did you just announce that you guys were going to have a baby?
No, that's not going to happen. But
Okay.
we have a grandchild though, so that's the next phase of life.
Chucky.
Good.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Okay, next, another shout out for my buddy, Tony Barranco. Tony was a guest speaker in my mentoring groups and they loved it. We had a blast. And I appreciate that. And I, for all of you, when you can reach out to students and younger people in some fashion to coach or mentor or help, I highly encourage it. You also learn a lot as you listen to those undergraduate students at St. Thomas. So again, Tony, thank you. Tony's going to cover a couple very prominent projects locally, the Highland Bridge, which is 3 blocks from me, so I get to really watch that one, and West End. And I think because those are so current and underway presently, Tony has some good insights on it. Tony?
Yeah, thanks, Russ. Appreciate everybody joining this morning. I'll share a couple of high-level trends leading it into why we're pretty bullish about a couple of the projects that we have underway. Obviously we've had the double whammy of both the social unrest really manifesting itself here in our Twin Cities more so than in other areas for obvious reasons, and COVID, and the combination of those two, I think, fed off of each other in such a unique way. And I think it's put a lot of pressure on both of the urban cores, and in particular in Minneapolis. And I think, one trend that we're seeing in general is both the movement of residents out of downtown and or work in office moving out of downtown. And yet there still be groups aspiring to have that urban feel with walkability and with amenities and with other things. And so I think these urban suburban locations are going to be really a strong counter to some of the urban office space. And I think that one project that we've been working on with our partners at 10 West End and the Transwestern team on the leasing side is, or the Excelsior Group is our partner, but the 10 West End project at 394 and 100 has seen a ton of activity, and we've been getting a lot of the urban core activity for many companies that just don't find the same amenity base that they found downtown, and or they're looking for a higher level of security, whether perceived or actual. It's definitely there. And so we're really seeing a lot of traffic at West End, and we are bullish about the activity there. And really that project has maintained both its construction pace and timing in spite of the pandemic. it's also seen its lease up pace accelerate through it. And so we've been uniquely insulated from a lot of the activity because of the fact that we're in an urban area that's amenity rich and still close by. It's meeting a lot of those factors. Highland Bridge, also the former Ford site in St. Paul, I think is a unique alternative to those more dense urban areas. We haven't really rolled out our office projects en masse, but we've got a lot of inquiries. The first office project that we'll do there is a medical office, and that service-based office I also think will translate significantly. And so we've had a ton of traffic without really even marketing for some of the initial retail and office at Highland Bridge. From a timing perspective, our West End site is poised to open in early 2021 with initial tenants moving in February. And at Highland Bridge, we're about a year from really getting started on any office projects there, as we're involved in some heavy infrastructure. A couple of things I'd point out just for those that want to be optimistic. I think Steve and Bob brought up some really good points about where the market is going. And I think that the concept of remote work will change office space for sure. I also think if you take a look at, there was this vast move toward densification and hoteling at the same time. I think hoteling will win. I think densification will not. And where that balances out for each organization, I think is going to be interesting to see. I'd also say that the good news for people that construct space is that everyone is going to need to do something. There aren't going to be any companies that said, we were in 100,000 feet. That's perfect for us. Everybody is going to need to change their space, whether on the inside of their box or whether it's growing space or reducing space. And for those that have assets that meet that amenity need in a location, I think you're going to see a lot of transactional activity because people have to do something, because no one's going to come out of this without having some different need. I'll kick it back to the group, and I've got some notes on capital, but I'll save that for later.
Thanks, Tony. Good update. Mike, or as we like to say, Chucky Salmen's up next. And I know that you were going to address some of the West End issues too, and I kind of like you to, because you've watched market activity, tenant activity very closely, including West End, which you and your firm represent. But I can remember the beginning of it. It was a real slog for 2 or 3 years getting traction, and now boom. And so maybe it's obvious, but maybe you could give us a little flavor of that, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Russ, and good morning, everybody. Tony touched on a lot about what was happening out at 10 West End, and I guess just to add to that, that market or submarket has really been one of the most popular in the Twin Cities over the last 10 years. That and the North Loop probably overachieved and were really the standouts in our Twin Cities market, and I think we're just seeing a continuation of that. New construction in that submarket is relatively new. Hasn't been anything new built there as far as office space in about almost 20 years. And so, we look at that market and see some, nice buildings that when we started in this business, at least were new, but have seen some deterioration, to say the least, and so a new building, and this one is just awesome. Can't wait to get people through there, and hopefully we can start kind of showing the general public, brokers and otherwise in January. But it's an awesome building in an awesome location, and as you say, it did start out probably a little bit slower, as a lot of new construction projects do. People in this town are kind of this is a show me town, right? They want to see what they're going to get, and they don't really like to look at it all on pictures and just trust that it'll work out. They like to walk it, they like to see it, and now that structure is up, it really is an awesome property. So the social climate also probably has added to the activity here, right? With COVID, and then what we're seeing downtown, some of the public safety issues, activity really has ramped up there, as Tony had mentioned. And we're seeing a lot of activity from downtown tenants. We're seeing a lot of activity from from suburban tenants, people that, again, want to be close to downtown, want to be close to the strong labor pool. And I don't know that there's a better option in the Twin Cities as 10 West End. We're seeing, again, people come take a look at the space. It's interesting that rate is not as big a deal as we expected that it might be, or that you might expect on a new building. You know, high $20 net rents. And I would tell you that after the first or second conversation, that is rarely the issue for people as we move toward leases. We've done 2 leases. We're about 25% leased, Carvel and HDR. So a couple of great tenants. We've got more activity there than we've gotten any building in the Twin Cities. So it's exciting to see. I think people are intrigued with the new development. And again, that submarket continues to be strong. Like I say, 10 years into it. And downtown, just to kind of comment briefly on that, although we're seeing some great activity from downtown, that submarket, generally speaking, is probably as slow as I've ever seen it in my 30 years working. Kind of sad for a lot of the reasons that Jim and Steve touched on previously. This public safety issue is absolutely something that has to get figured out. Looks like we're moving in the right direction, though. Again, you know, we won't know until that budget gets approved, hopefully next week. But that has to be solved, and if it doesn't, I'm afraid that downtown Minneapolis is in for a long haul. And the result, we've been the beneficiary out of 10 West End, but again, some things need to get figured out downtown. Otherwise, we'll probably be starting on 20 West End this year or next if things continue the way they're going. So 20 West End, by the way, is the second phase. Interestingly enough, as 10 West End got built, and as we're talking to tenants there, we've actually got quite a bit of interest on that second building as well. Tenants that can't quite fit in, or timing doesn't work for 10 West End. So we hope to see a second 350,000 square foot building out there sometime soon.
Hey, Russ, can I ask a question?
Sure. Yeah.
Mike, Tony, nice job. I'm curious, as I'm sure probably some of the attendees are, during the development that's carried through to today, which has gone right through COVID, have there been any major changes or any changes at all as a result of COVID that you guys have brought into the development of that building? Meaning, are there any building security improvements or exposure risk reductions somehow, some way, parking, improvements to parking? Because the bottom line is, our clients who are in downtown Minneapolis, who have already moved out of downtown or who are currently considering moving out of downtown, their 4 key issues are crime, building security, exposure risk, meaning how many people are we going to pass in the skyway, the hallway, the elevator lobby, the elevator itself, or in the parking lots or parking garages. So I'm just curious, what have you as a developer, have you been able to learn anything during this very difficult period of COVID to implement in this new project?
Rich, excellent question. However, here's what I'm going to do. That's going to be our first broad question for panelists. We're going to go back to your question to Tony and Chuck on that, so we can keep getting the rest of the panelists, including yourself, to do their opening. But it's a very good question. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now the next, this is fun. Hi, Eddie. I haven't met Eddie before. So but people, I said he's a good guy and you like him and all that. So I said, how do you pronounce your name? Is it Reamer? I said, no, it's Rymer, like Charlie Rymer, the golf guy. So I go, this is off to a good start. So this is what's fun for me. I'm meeting, and Jessica, you'll be coming up, and Alexander, new people, and Chris, that I didn't know, of course, because I'm old and I retired and I'm history, I'm dated, but now I get to meet you and it's fun. So anyway, Eddie is a principal at Avison Young, and he's a tenant rep, corporate services area. And I like this one. He says, what are the challenges you are seeing with the growing tech company sector? in this marketplace as it regards their office needs. And then I'll get right sizing a little later. I think that one is plenty to start with. You have a lot of meat on the bone on that, Eddie. So take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Russ. Nice to virtually meet you as well. I will say I have no relationship to Charlie Rymer, but I do get that question sometimes. But I'll start with some good news. I'll say if you're a tenant in today's market, you have a ton of leverage. So that's good news. I did a little research year over year. The sublease market in the first half of 2020 versus 29 nationally is up about 22%. So we have about 15 million more square feet of sublease space on the market. And I don't think that includes what I would call shadow space. You know, you get through buildings, you tour buildings, and sometimes a listing agent will say, you know, we have another group in the building where if they found the right subtenant, they would vacate. So that's space that I would consider as shadow space that's not even on the market. So it's a good time to be a tenant if you're in the market to renew or relocate. But to answer your question, I think Jim touched on a lot of this in terms of what are the challenges with growing tech companies. There's a handful that I'm working with, and if they had to go back to the office today, they would be out of space. But they don't know who they're going to get back into the office. And I feel like we're starting to turn the corner in the conversation of COVID. Not as much COVID anymore, you know, with the vaccine, and next year, it's more who's going to work from home and how do we get those people, you know, how do we determine how many people are working from home versus we want them back in the office. So I'm seeing some of the same things that, again, Jim had alluded to, as tenants are letting their leases lapse. You know, how do we sign a new 3, 5, however many year lease for 10,000, 20,000 square feet if we don't know who's going to come back into the office? So because of that, I think we'll see, you know, next year, whenever some of these groups start making decisions, a real flight to what I would call move-in ready space, your spec suites, your subleases. And just looking at some of the deals I'm doing now, all of them are some type of move-in space. Now that might not be applicable to, you know, 70,000, 100,000 plus square foot user, but to 50, 40, 20 and less, I think you're going to see a real flight to move-in ready space. And there will be you know, some of these groups might be fighting over some of the same space. So with that said, you know, Bob touched on a little bit too. It's, you know, what are the amenities? What are the wellness? It's kind of who's got the best mousetrap that these groups will move towards. I think the other thing is, you know, we talk about this activity, and Mike said it too. Yeah, the activity's up, but from what level? You know, we were at a pretty much standstill for a while. It is good to see some activity going. And then I don't have an answer to this. Maybe it's a question we can touch on later, but with the activity, does that necessarily mean these companies are growing? You know, some of the conversation I've had, companies were ready to expand and were at full capacity. And now with COVID and coming back from work from home, you know, they might be getting rid of 20, 30, 50% of their space. So it's just going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the next few years, like Steve had mentioned.
Eddie, thanks. We can talk about this offline. My nephew is a major hitter with Avison Young. He's the managing partner for New York City. His name's James Nelson.
Yeah.
He's got his own podcast. He's done a lot of major deals. We can talk later about that. Thanks
I'm
again.
aware. Yep.
Okay, Chris Culp, love it. Chris, thanks for your note. Good to see you again. Actually, a lot of time it just seems like yesterday, but it's probably been 3 years since we've connected. So anyway, Chris is the CEO, founder of the Excelsior Group, focused on people, culture, and where the next opportunities are. I like these two questions that Chris is going to address. Why will our urban core thrive again? And what are the 3 silver linings of the pandemic? Get your pencils ready. He's going to give you the 3 silver linings. Chris, take it away.
Thanks, Russ. Good to see you, and good to be part of this panel. Yeah, I think the short answer to, why will the urban core thrive again is for the exact same reasons it did. My partners in Tony and Chucky here have provided good reasons why, areas outside of the urban core will be successful, and I'm rooting for that for sure too. But I think it's critical that we have a successful urban core, and without that, I think the rest of the area, rots a little bit. And so I think for the reason that people want to be connected, someone touched on it earlier. I think it was Steve, the 20 to 30-year-olds, and really beyond that, even to are craving and yearning for that connection that the office provides. There's been a lot of investment in our urban cores, both of them over the last 20 years, say, whether that be big major sports investments, or massive residential investments, projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and businesses, whether they bought their buildings, built their buildings, or made major lease commitments. They're going to want to protect those investments, and you're seeing it even yesterday. I can't remember what organization it was, but a bunch of contributors from major corporations in the Twin Cities making contributions to sort of this both and approach to public safety, and really, one, I think they think it's the right thing to do, and two, I'm sure there's some self-interest in that, right? To protect their investments and to protect our urban core. So because of the big investments that have been made over the last 20 years, and a lot of it being spurred by the downtown council, I think you'll see people make that commitment to returning and keeping it thriving. And sports is a big deal in our culture. I mean, the four major sports for sure have made massive investments to ensure their continuity through the pandemic, and we have the good fortune in this urban area to have all of our major sports, and maybe call it six, be in urban areas. If you throw in the Loons and the Lynx, and you've got six major sports that are all in urban areas, and mostly in the urban cores, 5 out of 6 of them. I think the difference, or a key factor this time as well, is that there is a residential population, and while there may be a temporary move out of it, those housing units still exist, and frankly, they're really nice housing units that people will want to live in again, and create hopefully that critical mass that Chucky was talking about, or maybe it was Steve, but getting people back on the streets, that will help us feel safe, because I think sort of general public policing, if you will, is probably more effective than even doubling the number of police officers walking around. So that I think is a difference, and an important distinction this time. I think the hoteling that Tony touched on may also then lead to kind of off-peak traffic times and off-peak parking access. I think people will come in and leave at different times, and make those commutes simpler. So those are all the reasons why I think the urban core will thrive again. The silver linings, really these have been touched on already, but at least the notes I made. But the improved use of technology, and sort of necessity being the mother of invention. I don't know that much was invented, but it's forced our use of it. We're doing it right now. I don't know that I was on more than a very rare virtual call, and now I feel like I spend 6 hours a day in front of the at least in front of the camera. And so, and the rest of the time is still at the computer. But so I think that's one. I think another one has been really intentional communication. I think intentional communication from leadership. I think intentional touch points with our colleagues, where we might have had, caught each other in passing. But I think now that intentional communication, while sometimes burdensome, is also more productive. And a reset of priorities, maybe outside of the business world, but also in the business world. I think companies have reset what's important to them, what's important to their culture, what's important to their people, and what's important to their success, financial success going forward. And this provided an opportunity to reset those priorities. But like Steve, I've been married for as long as you, but I've never spent this much time with my wife and kids, and it's been far more positive than negative, even though they might change, they might flip that around as it relates to me.
Thanks, Chris. That was great. Rich Reynolds. Nice to see you again, Rich.
You too.
Been a
Good to
while.
see you. Yes.
Rich is president and CEO of Area Commercial Real Estate Advisors. And I like these couple questions. You said, as a seasoned veteran in commercial real estate brokerage, how has your workday changed under the current state of COVID? And what are you doing to stay focused on business amongst all these distractions? And then secondly, empathy seems to be a buzzword in today's CRE climate, which includes civil unrest, COVID, and economic distress. But what does this really mean in practical terms? Go ahead, Rich.
Thank you. Thank you, Russ. By the way, I just want to say thanks. Thank you for setting this up, Todd, Jeff. This is really good to be reconnected with a group of peers and participants. We were just talking in our office yesterday how disconnected we feel from even our peer group, because we all get to know each other over the years, whether you're a landlord, developer, broker, property manager, project manager. And at the end of the day, I would say these are generally very friendly, positive relationships. And that leads me to the question of, what are we doing today to deal with the current state of COVID, and what are we doing in our workday to stay positive and avoid the distractions? Quite frankly, I think we like to say around here, don't fight the distractions. They're there. It'll drive you crazy. It'll drive you absolutely crazy. It's commonplace, as was a moment ago when I think it was Steve Chirhart's dog climbed up on the couch behind him mid-conversation. It's commonplace to see people or kids walking behind somebody on a Zoom call, or at least on a conference call here, little kids arguing or, talking to their mother or brother, seeing, dogs on couches. And by the way, guys, it's not just happening for us in commercial real estate, it's happening for our clients.
That was my emotional support dog.
Okay, I respect that. Of course, you can't take it on an airplane anymore. They've just ruled that. But, while we were on that call with the two little girls in the background being a little noisy, we also had a CFO on the call, right? So it's a client CFO, downtown Chicago, trying to figure out what their plan is for early January, because they postponed their move that they were planning a year ago. And, those are the real distractions that not only we're dealing with, but everybody's dealing with. So, I would say, quite frankly, we are trying to embrace the distractions, make some fun of it. It is humorous because most of the time throughout my 30-year career, this has never happened. This kind of distraction has never happened. I'm not speaking of COVID, but the result. And, I think office users, the C-suite, all the way down to staff members are dealing with the same thing. And that leads me to my empathy point. Empathy was, it's a highly used buzzword right now. And while we try to be empathetic with our clients and as it relates to what their needs and wants are, now it's truly an emotional form of empathy, in that you don't know who's dealing with what at home. So you can be a C-suite executive and we can be talking about business, but behind the scenes, that person may have someone in the hospital dealing with COVID, or very ill, or can't get to see their mother over the holidays in another state away because of the restrictions or the fears of exposure. So, you know, be sensitive with each other. Have fun though, too. I want to underscore that. We have to have fun during these very strenuous times. I just looked it up because I couldn't remember. COVID arrived in the United States of America in January of 2020. So we're weeks away from, hate to say it, celebrating our first 12 months of COVID in America. And it has been a long, long road. And while many people are betting on the vaccine, as has been mentioned several times on this call, I want to point out that there are quite a few skeptics out there as to whether or not it's going to be as effective as we all hope it will be. And then the question is how many people are actually going to get the vaccine? Will employers start to require employees getting the vaccine in order to arrive and come back to the workplace? So I think we still have a long, hard road ahead of us. I'd like to stay positive and focus on the benefits of the vaccine. But in the meantime, I predict we still have many months of trepidation and additional stress due to COVID, due to crime, due to security issues, risk of exposure, cost, financial hardship. And through all this, we have to be very empathetic with our clients, with each other, and how we're doing business, and also try to find a way to bring some humor into this. I know it's not a humorous thing, but we have to find a way to have fun, be positive, and really, take care of our clients, take care of each other. So,
Thanks, Rich. We're getting good diversity of comments and views, which I really appreciate. Another new face, new person I get to meet is Jessica Mogilka. Hi, Jessica. And she is an executive vice president at JLL, tenant rep broker focusing on Twin Cities. I like the first one. She's active on LinkedIn and she has a podcast on real estate, The Fly Through. And can you talk about that role in social media and real estate and how you do it? Wow. Take it away.
It's nice to meet you, Russ. Thank you so much for having me. As I was thinking through things to talk about and big trends that we're seeing and how all of that kind of comes together, it occurred to me that real estate and social media are at this intersection of a new way of thinking about how we can move forward as an economy, as how we use our offices, where our employees are actually going to be sitting. And the big trend there that I see is the flexibility of all of everything, right? Flexibility of where your employees are going to be. And the LinkedIn and the podcast is really about, I think, flexibility in how people and the shifting of how people get their information, how they communicate with each other. Most of us, if you haven't talked to somebody in a while, you just go to their LinkedIn page and find them there. And it's a great way to keep in touch with people. I don't think that real estate has fully embraced everything that you can do and the opportunities in social media. We're a pretty traditional kind of culture, if you will. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. It keeps me on my toes. I love doing the podcast. I talked with Maureen Machowski a couple of weeks ago about the Highland Bridge project, which was fun. And so I get to learn a ton of stuff. I learn a ton from podcasts that I listen to. But the way that people are dealing with this last year and how social media and how some of the younger employees are going to want that flexibility, I think social media and how people are using it in real estate and how we're inching forward in some of that, and how people in the real estate market and developers and who's the money behind some of the developments is going to be that all of that like links together in my mind around this flexibility trend and how people are going to be using their real estate, which I do think is going to change. Interestingly, even though I think that how people use their real estate will change, almost all of my clients are planning their real estate exactly the same way as they did 2 years ago. So we looked to somebody else's comment when they looked at a floor plan, the density was still there. I think a lot of companies, I don't think that and I'll be interested in the architecture panel on what they're seeing and how that's going to develop. But right now, it still looks the same. They're just not planning on putting somebody in every single desk. We're still just going to have people every other desk when we actually do come back. But we will allow people to have some flexibility to work from home. And I think that's where a lot of companies are right now, is figuring out, all right, Russ, how many days do you think you're going to be in the office? And you're this category of employee. So what does that mean? Do you get to work from home 2 days a week, 3 days a week? And then how do we overlay that into our actual floor plan? And who is going to actually show up and who isn't? The next year to 2 years, and depending on that vaccine conversation, is going to be really interesting. And I think there will be lasting fundamental changes in attitudes around how people use offices and how they're designed. But right now I'm not seeing it yet.
Flexibility. Wow. That's great, Jessica. I appreciate that. You also reminded me of another thing. I don't think I had updated my LinkedIn profile since the Twins won the last World Series. Every one of my students was dinging me on looking at your LinkedIn and sending a message. So I'll admit I had a niece who's really technologically more savvy, set the thing up. So I put a little update on mentoring and this University of Minnesota thing. But it's amazing. You get a lot of connections there. So God, I'm glad I'm not looking for another job, but I might need to. Tony, I'm just down the street from your, bridge thing. I could, but then my neighbors might kill me. All right, so there we go. All right, Alexander, another new friend. Where are you, Alexander? There you are, looking at you. With Frauenshuh. And in the property management area, and the area you wanted to address is the question that Rich Reynolds had earlier for West End about what's happening in terms of acclimating and changing anything because of COVID. So take it away.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me. I was, I'm kind of in that category. I'm almost 35 and I've been at the office every single day. I haven't made the choice to work from home, although it is an option for me. So I've heard people talk about the four-day work week possibly, or flexible work week, but I'm in that category where I want to come to work. I want to be here. I want to be here 5 days a week, but I think in the future it'll be more flexible, where users maybe will come in on certain days, and depending on their schedule, if they have families, if they have kids. So I think it'll definitely be more flexible, but I still see a majority of people wanting to come to the office as much as they can. And I was actually just thinking about and I'll talk about the operation side just a little bit, but I never thought that I'd be, or my job responsibility would be running to Costco and trying to track down some Lysol wipes and hand sanitizer. That was part of my job in March, was trying to find a bunch of wipes and hand sanitizer for our team. And I've learned a lot about cleaning and cleaning supplies, and I've learned a lot about HVAC systems. And that's probably the biggest challenge is cleaning and HVAC. We've received a lot of questions about how are you cleaning, what are you cleaning, what chemicals are you using. We've also had a lot of questions about the HVAC systems, and there's the CDC standard and there's the ASHRAE standard, and there's a ton of information. But again, what a lot of people don't understand, and a lot of people aren't HVAC experts, nor am I, but a lot of people don't understand these are guidelines. And we've actually ran into a few cases where people, office users, have had leases expiring within the next year, and they've attempted to use these guidelines to say, you're not following the CDC guideline or the ASHRAE guideline, and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing and trying to claim it as a default to the lease, where these are guidelines and we're trying to run our systems as best as possible. But for the future, I think they'll definitely have an impact. We're doing a third-party analysis right now at 7700 France just to determine how our building's operating and looking to the future of where do we want to change our HVAC system, whether that's in the main lobby, the conference rooms. I've also thought about, we're going to do an elevator modernization. Maybe we install an ionization system in the elevator. So health and wellness is big. It's been very, very challenging on the office side. I also manage some retail, and that's been challenging as well. Bankruptcies, smaller retailers now are stuck with not being able to have people eat in their restaurants. And I think for the people that made it through the first wave, fortunately, we've tried to do some team lunches and buy some gift cards and hand out gift cards to our tenants. But the retailers, they're very concerned. They're very concerned about the future and what's going to happen and how long this current shutdown will last. So I guess my final comment is, yeah, support local retailers and try and buy some team lunches or gift cards, because they're concerned about what's going to happen in the future.
Good update. Thank you, Alexander. Chris Stockness. I was just talking to Bob Stercota yesterday. Bob and I are working on some of the St. Thomas stuff together. Chris is with Shenehon, is an appraiser, and one of the questions that he wanted to address are, what are the challenges for appraising commercial real estate? Yeah, I imagine there are a lot. So I'll let you go with that one. Go ahead.
Yep. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me on the panel. And just being with an appraisal background, I thought that would be kind of a good question to bring out for the group. And with appraisal, we're often we are considered the more academic, kind of approach to valuation in the real estate market. And what we've had to deal with and the challenges of this is just the uncertainty, not unlike anybody else in the commercial real estate market. But being more of an academic approach, we have to rely on sales data and, market rate data, and trying to get a pulse on what that is, and dealing with obviously an environment where sales activity is less than 50% of what it was 12 months prior, creates certainly some challenges on the appraisal side of it, the valuation side of it. And the market, when you're looking at it, we have a situation where, in January of this year, we're starting to hear about, COVID and starting to kind of get it on our radar. And then all of a sudden by March 15th, we're not going in the office anymore. And, since that, there hasn't been a lot of sales activity that's gone on in the market. A lot of the sales that have gone through were stuff that were maybe already in the works, in terms of, kind of our activity that we have to rely on. And so, we're really forced to try to reach out to the market. And, of course, when you talk to people, though, everyone's kind of dealing with the same, kind of uncertainty issues. And, in particular, downtown real estate, as has been touched on by the other panelists, is, really just a night and day difference from what we had, if a year ago, or going back to last summer of 2019, where we had a very vibrant downtown, a lot of positivity. And it's just completely the inverse of that now. The buildings are boarded up. It's, a workforce of 10, maybe 20% of what it was. And, there's none of this kind of natural amenity that I think was very attractive to a lot of people when they worked downtown, and that you had the access to the restaurants and, other entertainment options. And within a short walk, you can have a lot of access to different things. You can walk back and forth to meetings. And we're not doing that anymore. And, obviously the mass transit concerns and all of that. And so it'll be really interesting to see going into 2021, how this market, particularly in downtown, starts to recover, and how much of an effect that this kind of flight to the suburbs is going to have. Obviously the West End project has been discussed, and, that's a great example of just a really excellent alternative to being downtown right now. And so if I was a tenant, I think I would be taking a real hard look at that. But maybe 12 months ago, I was taking a harder look at downtown. But it's just really hard to go bring somebody in downtown and say, yep, come and lease space. And, you know, the Target store is still boarded up, and all the street level retail is boarded up. And, you know, most of the retail is not even operational. And there isn't the, you know, the restaurant service access that you had and all those amenities. It'll be really curious to see kind of how the downtown leadership, if they can step up and start to, you know, kind of pull things back together and, you know, kind of get the city going. And, you know, they really need to work with the business community to do that. And so, you know, it's certainly a very challenging time ahead. And so we're just trying as appraisers to just keep our finger on the pulse. I don't think, you know, one of the things going into this is we haven't had it wasn't really market fundamentals. This is a different, you know, issue that we're dealing with here. Nobody that I'm aware of has said, oh, I've dealt with a pandemic before. And so we're all kind of figuring this out as we go along. And so it'll be interesting. You know, I don't think values have cratered. I mean, we're not, you know, saying office properties are down 25%. You know, we're not saying they're up dramatically. And we're just trying to keep an eye on how things move forward, just like everybody else.
Thanks, Chris.
I have a really quick follow-up question for Chris, if it's okay, Russ. And this could be for the whole panel too, is around how you see valuations and co-working, and how a co-working space or flexible workspace inside of a building is changing or could be changing the valuation of buildings going forward.
That is a very good question. It's not something that I've really dug into yet, but I am curious that, having gone through those spaces where it is very collaborative and it's sort of designed to be in a collaborative, even though you're co-working and you have your own different thing that you're doing. But, you know, I mean, a lot of that's designed to have community areas. And so how do you kind of keep that model going when you're dealing with this issue of needing to be social distance? And that's, you know, not going to change immediately. So I'm curious on that myself.
Okay, panelists, this is the juncture. This is the time where it's called Russ now is going to mix it up. You've done a great job, but you know what? You can change it now. Okay, you're going to raise your hand, but here's what my first question. This will be published too. What % of workers will come back to the office, assuming two things? Public safety is fine, COVID has been handled. You can say 25% will come back, 50% will come back, 75% will come back, or 85% will come back to the office. Okay, raise your hand if you think 25%. None. 50%. 1. 75%. 2. 85%. The rest. Did everyone vote? About 6. Okay, so most of you believe that if we get a handle on the public safety, big if, and COVID, you know, that most people, not everybody, want to be back in a collegial office environment, although there will be some that will remain remote. Is that a fair?
Can I ask a qualifying question?
Yeah.
Did you mean for the year 2021, or is this just in general?
No, I meant, yeah, you can say 2020. I just said near term, we're going to solve both of these. Call it 2021. I just want to get the flavor, because some people might say, no, they'll never come back that much. Shit, they like remote. Eddie.
Well, I think the other thing I want to clarify, is it full-time or is it part-time? Because I think you'll have three pillars: the full-time people, which is 4 to 5 days a week, the part-time, which is once or twice a week, and then the fully remote.
Okay, that's good. That's a good point. It should be clarified, but I'm the moderator. I'm not going to.
Yeah, you can do what you want.
Okay, so what I heard from a major employer would be this: 1/3 of their workforce, office workforce, will be remote. 1/3 will be hybrid, half remote, half in the office. You know, and 1/3 will be full-time in office. And it just, who knows? But that sounds kind of maybe. Yes, go ahead, Chris. You're thinking. What are you thinking?
Doesn't happen very often, and it's always very visible when I am thinking. Was there thought that 1/3, was that the choice of the organization, or was that a prediction on the choice of the worker that would stay home?
It's both. Chucky will guess who I'm talking about, so I won't tell you. But anyway, I think it's a combination of it will work for the organization to have those people remote, and for those employees, they want to be remote. They like being remote. The other one is, the mix bit, and that's kind of a cop out because who knows? And then the other being in the office. I mean, what I'm hearing a lot of is most human beings are social animals and want to be around other human beings in some collegial setting, given safe, given not health issues and the rest. But, we've learned how to do remote work. So there's some people go, you know what? That's okay with me. I don't want to go down there, don't have to have another car. Bob Pfefferle. Yes.
Hey, Ross, the other thing I think that, we're seeing and hearing, and that's a great point. And I think there are certainly organizations that, third is probably going to work. It really, I think, also depends on the type of business that they have. There are certain companies have heard, are raring to get back. I mean, nationally, we've heard from, some tech companies that, they had already had work from home strategies in place. And so, once they get a chance to get back, they want to try and get everybody, back into the office, because what you just mentioned and what we've heard several times is, culture, community, brand, collaboration, all of those things suffer in the work from home environment. Even with I think as Rich had mentioned, the intentionality of some of these companies trying to reach out, it still is a problem. We've heard from some major law firms across the country that maybe not an existential crisis, but really concerned. Steve Chirhart mentioned earlier, how comfortable he is working from home as a senior leader. That's great. How do you get them back to the office? Because those younger people, those younger partners, if the senior leaders are all comfortable staying home, that's going to have an impact. So it all kind of translates back to then that work environment that really provides an equivalent, if you will, to that level of comfort of sitting in North Oaks or sitting in Aspen or wherever they might be, so that they're in, because that leadership for the long-term sustainability of firms and companies is important. But clearly from everything that we're hearing here too, there's changes afoot. It's just really going to be, dependent on the organization and what really drives, their business. I'm curious to hear as whether it's Transwestern or TaTonka or, Excelsior Group or whoever it might be, Ryan, what are they facing even within their own companies as far as, that element of the business. And this is just, obviously one microcosm in commercial real estate, but and then I think maybe Jessica mentioned it'd be interesting to hear what the architectural panel has to say and feedback they've been getting. But, I think we've mentioned it. We're social beings. And so the office really needs to be there to support those social encounters. The one thing I heard from a leader of a head of a corporate real estate group here recently was that, we have to reevaluate the core purpose of coming to work is, because we know we can do the work outside the office. So it's not just about doing the work. What do we need that office space for? And that gets back to some of the other things I guess I just mentioned regarding the collaboration and community. And
I refer all you tech savvy people to wonderful chat line. And Jessica just said, I'm more interested in how companies will come back. Now, there's so many damn comments, I lost you, than how they will come back. Do you want to expand on that? Jessica?
Sure. Sorry, I was trying to unmute. So I think that comment is I think there's a lot of conversation. We have, the spreadsheet with all the companies announcing they're not coming back until fill in the date, June, July, August, September next year. And to me, that's going to happen when a vaccine comes through and the safety conversations are addressed. How am I getting to work? Is it safe on the bus? How am I doing? All that stuff will take care of itself. But I think companies need to be thinking really hard right now about this conversation that we're having, which is who is going to come back and how are they going to come back and what are those expectations going to be? Because, and if they're not communicating that with their employees, I think people are going to have a hard time with change management of bringing folks back to the office and addressing those expectations if they say, okay, everyone's back June 1st, but nobody has mentioned that before.
Interesting. Okay, now, go ahead, Steve.
I was going to add on a comment there. I think you look at our tech sector, the FANG stocks have accommodated, the majority of the growth in the office sector here in the last few years. And I think there's a lot of demand there. But if if you touch on Bob's comment, it really does depend on what type of business you have. I mean, I think the biggest complaint law firms are having today is the senior guys and women are staying at home working, and they're not able to transfer their knowledge to the junior associates or the new hires. So there's a huge loss of productivity in that learning curve. And if you talk to engineering firms that work in teams, at least early on in COVID, they were weeks and months behind project deadlines because people couldn't collaborate effectively on Zoom calls as they were when they were in the office. And I've talked with a number of firms who have hired new employees recently, and it is really difficult to assimilate them and get them into your culture again when you're working remote. So, I think there's going to be a percentage of people who will want the flexibility, but I think there's some huge advantages of keeping the office together with a strategy in place to, maximize productivity and collaboration.
Hey, Todd, can I read your chat line comment? Is he there? He's looking at me. He's not talking. I'll read it.
Yeah, of course you can, my friend.
All right. My wife has been running multi-state sales team remotely for years. They have figured out a number of ways to develop culture, train employees, and work collaboratively even through remote. But it is very hard and requires a commitment to resources. I don't see it working long-term for most employers. I agree with the 85%. This has gotten some action. This has gotten good action among this group.
Well, they know how to work on Zoom, but it's hard. It's an every single day commitment to doing a ton of Zoom calls. And she's on the phone all day long.
Jimmy Freytag.
I was just going to comment. I mean, it really depends on what kind of business they're in. And I've done, believe it or not, a handful of financial services deals during COVID. They're smaller, but they have security concerns if they're going to be working at home. You're not going to be meeting with your client to get a new $10 million account, but hey, come over to my kitchen table. And then the other thing that is a buzzword that's come up, and it's true, is the office is the silent partner of strategy and culture. And you might be able to build that via Zoom, but people need a place to work. And I think by being locked in your home, I mean, in Steve's situation, my situation, you have room, you don't have a lot of distractions at home, you can be productive, but a vast majority of the workforce needs a place to delineate work and home and also have a place to work. Our younger employees with families, they have a lot of distractions at home with, kids and not enough room. And so you do need that place. It will be more flexible. And I don't know if it's gonna be a third, but you're still gonna need a physical place for work. And
yeah, Jimmy, it's also hard to suck up to people remotely. So when you've got junior level employees that want to set themselves apart, they're going to be staying. And that competition, in particular in type A businesses like ours, will feed onto each other. And you won't let your colleague get ahead of you because you're not in the office.
Yeah.
I saw someone.
I just want to make a comment on really what everybody's talking about here, but the younger group especially, if they become a commodity and they can work in the house and never come into the office, and they don't have a culture to go to, they don't have a great workplace to go to, when they get a $5,000 raise, they're going to just go to the next company because the culture at their kitchen table is going to be the same as it was with XYZ. I think you have to get them back in the office. I think companies, we've tried this before. This isn't the first time people have said, okay, everybody's going to work remotely, and productivity is lower. Culture, you lose the culture, and they end up bringing them back to the office because you need that collaboration. And especially for the young group who needs to look to somebody to see how to do it, ask questions, they need to be in the office. I'm going to tell you 85's low. It's going to be 95% in the next, might take a couple of years, but we'll be back to full capacity within a couple of years.
Chuck, you want to bet that on the golf course, 85 versus 95?
No, I like just taking money based on our golf skills. I'll take you on that.
Hey, Russ, I just wanted to add in too, because I've got, there's this blend. I've got kids that are in their, late 20s or mid 20s, and they're out there working. And I think all of that is, they're dying to get back in and connect with their associates. But there's also a component of that they like the idea of having the optionality, so back to what you said earlier, to have some work from home strategies, and we've seen that, the de-densification is happening, more permanent, work from home strategies are going to be a key part of it, because whether maybe you've got the sick kid, or you want to spend a week on, a week off, that's going to be a huge benefit, and I think something human resources people are going to be looking at, because as we mentioned, they want to have all that connectivity. So depending on how the company structures that, that's going to be important. I saw someone's comment on here, there's going to be a significant fear of missing out component back to the work, which is totally true. I mean, can you imagine, okay, I'm working from home, but my peer is going into work, and he's going to be right there with the senior partner. That's going to force everybody to try and come back in. But providing those strategies that provide flexibility, I think are going to be key. And those will be things I think people will be considering when they move or take jobs.
Well, Russ, I'd like to chime in if I could. I'll stick with my 50% in 2021. Mike Salmen, I agree with you. We'll get up 80% and above over the next 2 or 3 years, assuming this vaccine is effective. But I would just like to raise the concept to the audience that we believe that 150,000 square foot law firm in downtown Minneapolis or Chicago or wherever is not going to hit 100% or even 80% space utilization in the next 12 to 24 months, even with a vaccine. People like what they're doing, or even if they don't like working from home, and I'm here to tell you that I think a lot of people don't, but they fear the things that we've already identified: COVID, crime, exposure, risk. And so the way to fix this is, and I think this is going to create market opportunity for landlords and developers, leasing agents, tenant rep brokers. I think you're going to see a decentralization of the large, dense user of space in a single office building, particularly the CBDs. If I was a 150,000 square foot law firm, I would cut that number in half immediately, and I would go out and I'd set up somewhere between 3 to 6 well-located suburban facilities for my people to be able to leave their house and come and work in a low-risk environment. Low risk meaning low risk of exposure, safe, secure, maybe easier to access, shorter drive, no parking cost, etc. And I think that's where you're going to start to see those numbers get up towards 75, 80, 85%. But without it, there's no way a law firm that today is at maybe 5 to 10% maximum space utilization is going to get to 75, 80 plus in the next 12 months. Just won't happen.
Hey, Rich, do you think in that scenario, if there were a decentralization or a hub and spoke kind of thing like that, that they would utilize co-working?
I don't think so. No, I think they want to control their environment, control the culture. We've all been hitting culture hard here, and it's so true. Culture, strategy, collaboration. We all know what that equates to. Great ideas, the best performance, effectiveness, right? Efficiencies. So I think, Bob, good question about the co-working. I don't think so. Because with co-working, I walk into a co-working space, I can't control anything around me, okay? But if I work for a company that I want to work for, that means I trust that company to be well-run and to protect my interests, personally and professionally. So when I walk into a space in, for example, Eden Prairie, Minnesota, that my law firm employer just leased 10,000 square feet and call it a single story office flex building, highly secured, free parking, easy to get to because I live in Minnetonka or Chaska. I'm excited about that environment. Co-working, I don't know if I want to walk in there with a bunch of people I don't know. I really don't.
That's an interesting point. I recommend to all of you the most recent issue of the New Yorker magazine, November 30th, and an article essentially about venture capitalists and what they've become not helpful to startups, and using 2 examples where the greed overturned any good judgment. That's WeWorks and Uber, where there are massive moral flaws, no financial substance. It's fascinating, but it makes me think of WeWork. So we've all dealt with in this market and saw what happened. But I just, little reading for everybody. You probably get it online too. I read the hard copy. Okay, we're coming down the home stretch. We have 4 minutes. Any remaining?
Russ, I'm going to take into one of the things that came up about other things that I think will happen in office.
Yeah.
I think, from a point of differentiation, I think that the workspace is going to need to get more and more interesting. We've seen in a lot of our different sectors, including multifamily, this transition to more of a hospitality type of a feel. I think employers are going to need to have cool stuff in their office that make people want to go in. And I think that there will be the need to recruit and differentiate companies based on having really interesting things in their office. And so I think you'll see more and more of that as people make selections about where they're going in their next gen space.
And I think that will not only be the real estate, but the technology and furniture systems that people kind of put in. They're really going to get creative. I agree with that.
And I'll add to that the service and management and hospitality component of that as well. It needs to be activated, almost concierge-like, back to the idea of compelling reasons to go back to the office for everybody. Make it a fabulous experience from walking in to walking out. The office becomes a place to recharge as much as get work done.
I totally agree with that, and I think that's a way that people can differentiate their buildings and effectively offer an outsourced sort of culture creation or to their tenants that, not every tenant has to have all the perfect stuff because they might not have the scale to do it, but the building can offer that and tenants will pay a premium for that. They do in multifamily and they'll do it in office.
Yep, they'll get more efficient with space usage, which will allow them to be less concerned about that face rate on the deal, like you're seeing at West End.
Okay, Russ, let's let you answer or ask the question.
Do you miss me?
Yes.
I had to ask everybody, well, how about these young kids? They don't even know me. How would they miss me? But it's kind of fun. I do
We give you the big Casey Hankinson hug right now if we could.
Give me the Casey, which Tony had in one of his slides with the kids with he and
you just got to hold it.
Bathtub.
Hold it deep and you got to be square.
Oh, Lord, this is fun. We didn't get into investment real estate, but can you imagine how much fun it's going to be? You can go buy an office building and you can 3 years later have lost all your assets, everything, or doubled your profit because no one knows what the hell is really going to happen. That was our appraiser, Chris's comment about how do you forecast 2, 3, 4 years in this COVID? Where's it going to go? So, look, real estate is a fascinating area. I think you have to be a little mentally touched to do it. It's not for the stable and steady as she goes people, but it never lacks diversity and interest and excitement. Like, this was a great discussion. My God, I love it. And what was the hot button? What happens with coming back to the office? And everyone's different take on that. And really some great comments. So now, Todd Phillips, as with all wonderful moments in the day, this one's coming to an end. But before I end it, I'm going to tell one very small story. Would you like to hear a small story, everybody? Wait, are you okay? Okay. Well, I have my youngest, Maren, has twins that are 4 years old. One of them's Lincoln. And we were out, she lives in Afton, and we were out having dinner, my sister-in-law and me and then Darren, Maren, the twins. And I'm talking. Does that surprise any of you? I was talking. I was holding court. Lincoln breaks down and crying, just wailing. And his mother, my daughter, Maren, says, Lincoln, what's wrong? He says, Boompa. They call me Boompa. Boompa's talking too much. So I stopped. He gathered himself. And then he said, I like the sprinkles on my ice cream. They go crunch. So, it's a good lesson for all. I'm talking too much. I said, I wanted to say, well, I was in real estate. What do you expect? That's what we do. We talk. Anyway, you guys were great. I appreciate everybody got back to me. Everyone was, suited up for today. I really appreciate that. That's what makes these things work, is when everyone does a good job of participating. And I appreciate it. So there you go. Is that it, Todd?
Yet is wonderful, Russ. You all, I would love to make you talk longer because now I got to fill some space. I'm looking for my next panel and I don't see any of them. So we'll get the accountants up here and logged up soon. I'm going to screen
I've
share
got a
real quick.
question.
Yeah,
Quick question
go.
for Russ.
Yeah.
When you were filling out your LinkedIn profile after the Twins World Series, was that on a Palm Pilot?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. No, I think I better modernize this thing. Hell, I haven't touched it, I don't know, a long time. So
Do you still have a Rolodex, like an actual Rolodex?
Of course I do. It'll be worth a fortune at the antique shop. Are you kidding me? No, I actually still have a reasonably deep bench. I kind of like that. And this is kind of fun because some of you guys and gals I haven't talked to in a while. And this is a good way to reconnect. Yeah. Well,
Russ, I'll make a bid on your Rolodex right now.
yeah, yeah, sure. You'd like it. Well, Todd, where's Jeff? I haven't seen his face this morning.
He's watching. I don't know if he logged into a moderator spot or not. But I know he's been texting me for every mistake that you or I have made for the entire thing.
When
I'm
he
kidding.
recruited me to do this again, he said, I'll give you an hour 45. I said, are you kidding me? An hour and a half is ridiculous as it is. But look what, we did fill it up, you know, and I think there wasn't a lot of pause or redundancy. And I love it candidly when we get one topic that everyone just starts popping hot on and with some differences, which is what you want. So it was good. It was very good.
Awesome. All right. Well,
Okay.
if you're with my next panel, please
All right.
come online and
everybody.
show us your
Thank you,
camera.
Russ.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Russ.
Russ.
This
Thanks,
was a great
everybody.
group.
Thanks,
Thank
Todd.
Bye.
Couple closing items. This will be up on YouTube probably in a week or so. Give me a while to process it. I'm a little bit behind. I'm going to share my screen and show you all. If you want to stay on, any of you, Tony, Russ, Rich, anybody wants to stay on, just turn your camera off, turn your audio off, and you can sit and watch just like anybody else watch the rest of the event. You don't have to go away.
Yeah, do a direct deposit for my fee today, the same as always, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll trade you for that winning lottery ticket that I've been trying to come across as well.
All right, everyone have a good day.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
likewise.
much.
Bye.
All right, back to screen share. This is our lobby in case last time I brought up the wrong screen, but it was close. Anyways, this is us. We're at the 16th annual 2020 Office Summit. I have to thank again all of you sponsors who are wonderful. This was that panel that just finished. So if you want to connect with any of those people, if you didn't know them personally and want to meet them, push this LinkedIn button below their name. Bob Pfefferle here. You can connect with him and become his friend on LinkedIn and comment on his LinkedIn stuff. We're going to panel 2 here. You can see their names, faces, and what they're going to talk about here as well. We also have some really cool section with some ads for our sponsors and upcoming events down at the bottom. So we're not done doing events yet in 2020. We're going to keep going, and then 2021 is going to be on fire. Let's see, Rich, where is my group?
Well, we could just continue this on.
We could.
We lost everybody, I believe.
I do not have my next panel coming on yet. Danielle, Corey. Oh, there I got one.
Excellent.
Aja.
Todd, thanks again.
Yeah, Rich. So what have you been up to?
You know what? We've been coming to the office every day.
Yeah.
Other than the days that, you know, we go out for a hunt, a round of golf, or just, you know, time at home. We just moved our office from the shores of Lake Minneapolis because we sold the building we were occupying.
Yeah.
So we just moved to Eden Prairie. We're in City West Parkway. Again, a single-story office flex building, and we absolutely love it. But business is strong. It's good. It's very scary. I think we all, without saying it, would acknowledge this is a very scary time. So
it's weird. Well, office is going to be weird. I appreciate that discussion, and you guys do a lot of office deals, so it's going to be weird. But I think for the brokers watching us, like somebody said, everybody's going to need some kind of reconfiguration.
Absolutely. And that's why I pointed out that besides empathy, which is obvious, I think, you know, you still have to find a way to find some fun during these trying times and share that with the people you work with, whether it's a client or a colleague or your team. So anyway,
Yeah. Cool.
I'll drop
Yes.
off and leave
Thank
you
you,
to.
sir.
Thanks, Todd.
I was just notified that that next panel wasn't supposed to start till 9:40. So everybody hold tight, please. We got a 4-minute pause. I'll sing and dance in the background for you. And that is unless I accidentally turn my, yeah, I'm doing it right now. Singing and dancing routine. Hopefully you see this and you're entertained by it. I'm gonna flip through our, oh, you know what I'm gonna do real quick is show you our YouTube channel. Check this out. Everybody looking at your screen right now. I reorganized our YouTube channel. So this is kind of fun. You can see all of our events here. It's not completely organized yet, but we're getting there. If you want to go find out what's going on with any of our full events, you can go here. If you want to see my show, Power 30, in its entirety for any of our past events, where you can see news, information, and detailed interviews with really smart people. And then this down here, this bottom section is news and events short. So they're 1 to 3 minute clips that are fun, humorous, have to do with commercial real estate. Clips from events where it's maybe somebody like Bob Luck said something that I thought was really compelling. So we clipped that out and put that as a standalone video. So this is our YouTube channel. Please go there and check it out. And when you do, I need you to click the subscribe button. I don't see it here because this is obviously my view, but I need to get way more subscribers, and people my age and older don't know or think to subscribe to YouTube. So please do that when you get a chance. All right, here I am, right? Waiting for Danielle Lewis. Join us if you can. Turn your camera on. There we go. I think I lost my audio, so please hold with me. Danielle, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, good. And I got you too. All right, here we go. Thanks, gang. I'm sorry I thought you all started at 9:30. I was in a little bit of a panic because it was 9:30 and only one of you was on. But I'm going to turn this over to you all and let you take it away. Danielle, you're moderating. I'll still be here as usual. This isn't our first webinar event together, so I'll be here if you need me. Just holler, hey, Todd, I need something. But thank you. Take it away.
So Danielle, you want me to go?
Yep.
So Todd, actually, I'll be able to moderate, but Danielle and Asia from Whipley certainly will provide their insights on the slides and topic today. So,
well, if there's any decent replacement for Danielle, it's you, Corey. We'll take it.
Thanks, Todd. So, anyways, appreciate us, having this time slot. A very pertinent topic we're talking about today as it pertains to real estate strategies. Obviously, in real estate, cash is king, and certainly a large part of that is the income tax strategies that we employ with our clients and taxpayers. The environment, certainly during the Trump administration, provided ample opportunity to generate deductions and credits and other things to preserve cash and facilitate new deals. Certainly today we'll talk about those kind of bread and butter topics and strategies that we use with our clients, and certainly hope you guys enjoy this. To start off, we have Danielle Lewis. She's a senior manager in our real estate, construction real estate group here at Whipley. She specializes in opportunity zones and a number of other technical topics, which I'm sure many of the audience have seen. New to this panel is Asia Steinfeld. She's a manager in our construction real estate group and works with a lot of real estate clients on the strategies covered today. So with that, I think Danielle, you're up first.
Actually, Asia's up first. Let me share my slides quick here.
Yeah, if you want to share your screen, and Asia, you can certainly kick things off. So.
Hi, thank you again. Excited to be here for the first time. I'm Asia Steinfeld, and we're going to talk about some of the bigger changes that came with the CARES Act this year. The first of that being net operating losses. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act, or TCJA, repealed the ability to carry net operating losses back to previous years. But the CARES Act brought back that ability and to carry back losses up to 5 years for tax years 2018 through 2020. And the CARES Act also repealed the 80% adjusted gross income limitation for NOLs. for tax years 2018 through 2020. The next topic is excess business loss. The CARES Act also removed the excess business loss limitations that were previously capped at $250,000 or $500,000 if filing jointly for tax years 2018 through 2020. For business interest, TCJA created a business interest limitation that limited deducting current year interest expenses to essentially 30% of a taxpayer's adjusted taxable income. There are some exceptions to that limitation and other complexities surrounding it, but with the CARES Act, they increased that limitation to be 50% for tax years 2019 and 2020. The next bigger one is qualified improvement property. When TCJA came out, there was a technical error which required qualified improvement property to be depreciated over 27.5 or 39 years and not be eligible for bonus depreciation. The CARES Act retroactively corrected that error and correctly depreciate qualified improvement property over 15 years and be eligible for 100% bonus depreciation. A lot of time has been spent this year reanalyzing clients' assets and situations to determine how and if they can utilize the CARES Act changes and opportunities. For example, we had one client this year who had over $988,000 of qualified improvement property. And with the technical correction with QIP, we were able to take 100% bonus depreciation on that property, which resulted in about $983,000 of additional depreciation expense. And then with that, I'll turn it over to Danielle.
Thanks, Asia. So I'll keep this slide up for a second. So we kind of heard about all these really great things with the CARES Act, and to kind of hone in, one of the ways to take advantage of it is really cost segregation studies, which will be kind of the next topic here. As we're kind of looking at this slide, we can see that the NOL carry back, 2020 is the last year to kind of take advantage of it. So we're really kind of trying to hone in the opportunity for clients and other people to really take advantage of cost segs for their 2020 tax filing year, and hope by performing a cost segregation study, they're able to carry back some losses to these prior years where they probably had higher tax rate. So to kind of get started, I'm sure a lot of people on this call have heard about cost segregation studies. Essentially, they're a tool designed to break out a building, whether or not it's residential or commercial, probably the audience for this webinar, into smaller kind of depreciable buckets. So typically when you buy that office building, you're going to be stuck with 39-year depreciation. And that's all you're going to get. You have to depreciate straight line over that time. What a cost segregation guy typically does is they go in, they're able to break out the different pretty much buckets of, categorized as different sort of depreciation into shorter recovery lives, which then allow us to be able to take bonus depreciation on those assets. The study does have to be performed under certain IRS guidance. We get a lot of people asking like, hey, can't we just do a back of the napkin sort of cost segregation study? In order for them to really be supported, they do have to be performed professionally and kind of and certified in a manner of getting them done. So it is important to actually get the study done professionally and everything. But here is kind of an example of, one study that we had done. It was an acquisition price of about $5.6 million. And that led to an additional 1-year deduction of $880,000. So that's a huge first year benefit. You can see the net present values down below as, being able to accelerate that depreciation year one. But for this particular client, being able to take that $880,000 current year bonus deduction was massive. They were able to wipe out all their current year income as well as carry it back the prior couple of years as well. So cost segs are a huge tool for that. Definitely recommend them for this year. One thing to note as well, so these can be done on either a ground up construction type deal, or it can be a property that you purchased a couple of years ago. And maybe just haven't performed a cost segregation study. There's a tool we can use called on a form 3115 to change the methods that you've been using for your depreciation over the last couple of years. So the options are not just limited to whether or not you acquired the property in the current year. And particularly with, you heard Asia kind of talking about qualified improvement property. That can even be a component where it's hard to really break out which pieces were the true qualified improvement part, and which should be really still depreciated over 39 years. So we'll sometimes even have our cost seg guide go through that information so that we're maximizing our deduction on that side as well. 179D is
So
also.
Danielle,
Yeah.
sorry. So just going back to that. So if I acquired a property, let's just say in 2017, and I never did cost segregation, let's just say it was this office complex. If I did cost segregation in 2020, would my deduction be 880,000 in 2020?
So it wouldn't be that full amount. You'd have to subtract out how much depreciation you've taken from 2017 to the end of 2019, but it would be the net of those two numbers.
So like 800,000?
Probably, yeah.
It'd still be a pretty substantial number. So you get that catch up in 2020. Okay.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, and the good benefit of it, and what we do with a lot of people too, is maybe they've held a property for a good chunk of time. We just do the quick benefit analysis to make sure that the deduction that they're going to get, is worth the cost of the study still, if it's an older property. All right, hop into 179D. So this is a energy deduction, not a credit, that people are able to maintain on their property. You can get a maximum of $1.80 per square foot. This is basically based off of really old energy principles as well. So we typically see a lot of our clients being able to get the full $1.80 on their properties. And it can be a pretty massive deduction as well. We're still waiting to see what the future looks like for 179D. This is typically a deal that always gets extended in like January the following year. So I think we're still in limbo for right now on 179D studies, but you can do them for prior years as well. 45L is similar to.
Danielle, so that's set to expire in 12/31/2020, barring an extension. So anything completed new development through December 31st, 2020 would still qualify. It's just anything beyond that.
Yep. So section 45L has the same expiration dates that Corey just mentioned here. This one is a credit versus a deduction, and it's anything less than 4 stories. And that's going to be the big differentiating item between 179D and 45L. The credit is worth either $2,000 or $1,000 per unit. And we've certainly seen less people being able to take advantage of 45L in the aspect of that their buildings are usually too large for them. We're going to get past the stories. But when they can actually get it, so it's a really good credit, and it can be carried forward or carried back as well. So I think last year we saw quite a few people kind of taking advantage of it. So again, same to Corey's note, it expires at the end of this year. But will likely be extended going forward as well. Corey, any questions before I go to the next one?
Well, I guess, just to talk about, why do you think it's going to get extended? I think, predominantly it's getting bipartisan support by Democrats and Republicans just based on the energy efficient nature. I think one of the things we'll probably see is the driver or higher standards to qualify for the credit and or deduction. So I don't know if you have any additional thoughts, but I think many are feeling like it's going to get extended.
Yeah, I would agree. They typically just tag it on to a bigger package. And as we've kind of seen in the last few months, it's been hard as heck to get anything through the House and Senate. So I'm just kind of waiting for for them to tag it on to something essentially, which is generally why it always gets flown through in like January the following year. All right, so this slide kind of goes through the proposed tax policy going forward. Similar to the last comment, this is really going to depend really largely on what the Georgia runoff election results are going to be. So I think a lot of us are just waiting to see, where the Senate is going to be sitting for the next few years to be able to figure out, hey, which of these items are actually really going to change. But you can see on here we've got a much higher capital gains tax rate of 39.6%. Right now it's capped at 20%. Additionally, no step up in basis on death is a huge thing for a lot of our clients as well. the repeal of like-kind exchanges. I think it's been noted that the income above 400,000 is a huge deal, particularly in the real estate game. This is probably the 5th or 6th panel I've been on, and it's been a huge discussion in each of the panels, and kind of all of us are in this position where we really don't, at this time, think that they'll actually kind of move forward with the like-kind exchange repeal. Primarily because it really does generate the market and people to actually do their deals. Most people say if the like-kind exchange wasn't an opportunity, they would have just kept holding their property. Additionally, I think statistically they've found that through the flipping throughout the years that they generally end up actually creating more tax through their new acquisition than they had on their original if they would have just held it. So I think a lot of people are really working towards that right now. A lot of groups are lobbying and trying to educate, people on understanding what a like-kind exchange is, and that it's not just kind of this tax loophole or anything like that. That it actually does help stimulate the market, and particularly in COVID time now, we need to continue stimulating the market and having deals and everything. So the repeal of the like-kind exchange, I think, for the real estate group has kind of been the hot topic. Additionally, as far as opportunity zones, that has always received bipartisan support in the past. A lot of what Biden's proposal, or Biden's been a little more silent on what changes there could be for your opportunity zones. A lot of people, what they suspect is perhaps more compliance heavy data reporting. Personally, I'm hoping they don't do that because a lot of people are already kind of steered away from opportunity zones because of, we've got one form to fill out now. And then if we start having a bunch of other kind of red tape that people have to do in order to kind of certify their qualified opportunity zone fund, I think more people will be hesitant to want to partake in it, particularly with the threat of the capital gains tax rate going up to 39.6%. And what that kind of means, so for an opportunity zone, in order to get all the benefits for it, you have to defer a gain into your qualified opportunity zone fund. And that's a deferral of the gain, not the tax. So, if you had $100,000 stock sale, for example, and you put that into a fund, you're going to be paying the capital gains tax rate in 2026, not the tax rate for the time you incurred that gain. But in general, I think, we definitely won't see opportunity zones going away. I don't think anyone expects that since it has received bipartisan support. Really just looking at different metrics on what they may be reporting is the primary kind of concern. I think there was a couple opportunity zone acts that went through legislation that didn't go through, that kind of limited or attempted to limit where different businesses that people could create in an opportunity zone. But not sure if that will kind of continue through. As most of this is really going to depend upon where the House and Senate end up sitting. So I think that was the last of my proposal for the tax policy. Corey, what questions you got for us?
Yeah, I guess speaking on capital gains like-kind exchanges, I think in the past, at some point we had capital gains rates ranging from 15% to 20%. And certainly capital gains rates, preferential tax rates similar to like-kind exchange is there to produce the market and really establish a market and free flow amongst, stocks, equities, investments, and real estate. So, I feel like we've seen this on the Democratic docket previously, and it's never passed. So I would just echo, your comments that I really feel like, these things will continue under the Biden administration. I think there potentially could be an increase to the capital gains rates, but I really don't see these going away entirely. Additionally, the comment or if you look at this and you're saying, hey, I want to generate losses in the current year, yet potentially we have Biden tax rates in 2021, what's the benefits to, generating losses today and carrying back to, let's say, 2015, carrying back 5 years, why why are taxpayers doing that, and why is that strategy effective?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would definitely say like that's an analysis that we typically do. Once we figure out, hey, you've got this net operating loss, we typically do an analysis then of, hey, what was your tax rate in all these prior years? And does it make sense to actually carry back your NOL? Or does it make sense to carry it forward when you may be having larger tax years? I think predominantly we're seeing people who were paying, the 39.6% in prior years, so it makes sense to carry it back. But we've definitely had occasions where they were, for whatever reasons in the prior years, paying a super low tax rate effectively, maybe 10, 12%. And, carrying that loss back would have actually, created a worse tax situation as far as like refund wise than carrying it forward, and perhaps maybe doing some tax planning around, hey, let's do some Roth conversions the following year, and we'll use this net operating loss to kind of offset that income.
Asia, anything to add?
No, I would just echo what Danielle said. I think it's dependent on, your previous tax rates. And we've seen clients who have had like substantial, like the highest tax brackets in the past, and they're expecting not as high income next year. So it just makes sense to get back those tax dollars that they paid in from previous years.
Yeah, similarly for me, I think about a number of the brokers and working professionals that moved into the real estate industry or real estate profession subsequent to 2015. I would just say in our client base, we've hit some really big home runs from clients that were in that high paying 39.6 plus 3.8% tax rate on wages and or their brokerage income, and have since developed a real estate portfolio. In those circumstances, it's a no-brainer to carry back, and those carrybacks, 43.4% of a return from losses is substantial. And in most cases, that's cash today versus potentially utilizing that loss in the future. So, how can I, preserve or I would say, get more cash today to do more deals or do more real estate or do more investment or do more things with my knowledge, and that's a really effective strategy.
So Corey, one question for you. I get a lot of clients who, maybe are afraid of taking advantage of certain tax opportunities because they think the, next administration will make whatever they do retroactive. Kind of what's your response to that? And I think we generally have this principle of take advantage of the tax law now.
Yeah, I would just echo, the 100% bonus depreciation and loss and deductions available today, doing, accounting method changes, accelerating deductions, because you don't know what's going to happen in 2021. Is the business, qualified business income deduction going to go away? Is the ability to depreciate buildings and or personal property going to go away? You just never know what's going to change. So, I think certainly the environment in 2018, 2019 with the CARES Act and TCJA has been probably the best it's been for real estate since, tax shelter years in 1986, which is quite a ways away. But anyways, it's been fruitful for those in real estate, and I would continue to take advantage of it while it lasts, and hopefully it continues.
Another question that I usually get from a lot of people is for cost segs. They typically don't want to do them because they're afraid of the recapture a couple years later, once they sell the property. What's your kind of response to that?
Yeah, cost segregation, you're talking, benefit of time, value of money. Predominantly, if you have other sources of ordinary income, whether it's wages, brokerage income, commissions, or just your standard rental income. Again, you're getting that loss today, and that loss is first going to offset your ordinary income. So income tax at the highest marginal rate. And at the end of that netting process is going to be your capital gains. So there's a certain strategies to utilize cost segregation to mitigate your income taxes, your preferential tax rate. So in other words, if you're a wage earner, and let's just say you make $200,000 in wages, that the marginal tax rate is 37% on that, and there's no, applicable QBI deduction. If you own a rental property, let's just say 2 rental properties, and you did cost segregation, and your loss was 200,000 on that rental property from cost seg. If you also sold your other rental property, let's just say 100,000 of capital gains, your effective tax rate would be the capital gains rate on 100,000, which married filing jointly is 0% up to 80,000. So in that circumstance, you can see that $200,000 of loss is going to first offset your $200,000 of wages, and what's going to get left being taxed is your $100,000 at preferential tax rates. So there is certainly some strategy in leveraging cost segregation, not only to just generate losses, but also to lower your effective rate on an annual basis. This timing aspect to tax planning is amplified with cost segregation and goes beyond just generating a bunch of losses. It goes to mitigating your current year income tax, looking back and capturing refunds from prior years as it applies to 2020, and then also how can the strategy employ in 2021 and going forward to minimize your tax burden. The end of the game is how can I pay as little amount of tax on my income over the lifespan of my portfolio or my natural life, and cost segregation can play a huge role in that.
Yeah, I agree. Todd, are we done at 10 or 10:10?
You've got another, well, there's some confusion on the schedule, but you've got another 10 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I thought we started at 10:30 today, so.
I guess, is there questions, Todd? I mean, is there questions from the audience or those on here? Or do you have questions?
Corey, I always have questions. Have you guys talked about PPP?
Oh, gosh.
We have not.
So, I mean, I'll just give you our example, and I'm an open book about it. We got PPP. We're in the event business. We got shut down when COVID happened. I took all that money and paid it to our employees because that's what it was for. In order to have it deducted, you had to pay it to everybody. Now the IRS is saying it's not tax deductible. So we got a tax bill to pay. Money's gone. What are they going to do, man?
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, the intent of PPP, on the onset was, that the loan is going to be forgiven. This is free money. And then, the tax people get involved and it's like, well, yeah, it's, free money, but all those expenses you use with the money are non-deductible. So I would say there's a number of legislators currently trying to change that. And to change the tax policy or understanding of those expenses being non-deductible. At this point, that has not happened. Additionally, there's been some commentary on the timing of that income or expense. And I think recently, I think last week, they basically closed the loop on and providing guidance that, any expenses that were incurred are going to be non-deductible in the year that they're incurred. So there was a potential strategy to say, hey, well, I'm going to wait on my forgiveness until 2021 so that I can take the expenses in 2020 and pick up the income in 2021. I would say the recent guidance has pretty much closed that loophole. There are banks out there that are accepting applications. I would say a number of the bigger ones are not. But for most clients, based on that recent guidance, I'm saying go in there, get it over and done with. Get as much as you can forgiven, if not the whole thing, and let's move on. But you're right, Todd, there's a lot of clients and taxpayers that are facing some pretty significant tax bills based on those dollars. And we're using the same tax strategies that we're talking about to minimize that. But yeah, it is currently a bad fact pattern for taxpayers that did receive that money.
That's a great point, Corey, to see if there's anything else you can take a look at. Section 179, what are some other ways I can get more expenses into this tax period. But think about the failing businesses for a minute, the restaurants that said, okay, we're going to stay open because we got this PPP and we're going to serve takeout and we're just going to do what we can to keep people employed. They're barely holding on. There's no way they're going to come up with the money to pay that. So what are you coaching people? Are they, because presumably you'd have to pay estimated tax payments, right? So you should have paid that money in already, or do you wait till April 15th? Do you wait for Congress? What are you saying?
I mean, as far as the taxes, I mean, I think it's a case by case basis. To be honest, I've seen some restaurants do really well. They have adapted, use alternative strategies. There's some here in Shakopee that have done really well. But downtown, it kind of depends on your area. Did you have a patio? Did you have an environment conducive to still, having some business that makes you profitable? And it's kind of unfortunate if you were not, teed up for success in the pandemic that you had no idea was coming. But I think that's the, number one question is how can we maintain profitability? And then step two is, well, how do we manage our taxes and what's our tax strategy? And some of those is, making investments in employees, making investments in your restaurants to be conducive and be profitable. I've seen some igloos and things outside so that they can utilize their patio in the winter. I mean, some of those ideas are forthcoming, but also an investment by the restaurant. So I think, to the most part is let's make investments. Let's use the money, rationally, but also, how can this, lead to an ROI in the future?
Can you fully expense that igloo?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not a structure. It's not a building.
You don't need a cost seg for that. You can.
You don't need a cost. Just go 100% depreciation.
You can take that igloo and write it off. Even the heater that they put in it. So, have you eaten?
That is awesome. So there's how you recapture some of that PPP tax.
Todd, have you eaten in one of those igloos? They had them downtown previously, but now I've seen them in other restaurants.
I'm not going downtown, brother. I live up north, man. I don't make it past the lake. I get off for a peninsula and I get nervous. I'm kidding. I'm going to Florida this afternoon. We're going where it's open, where there's gyms are open and the beaches are open. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
48 winters in a row in Minnesota. I'm going to find something different, a little different flavor this time. You forced me out. Shoot, now I had something. 1031s. So if you are looking at the Biden tax proposal and you're a real estate person and you start to freak out, what can you do? What are some strategies, 1031 or whatever you can do to try to capture gains now, or do anything you possibly can to put things in 2020, which might be more favorable than 2021? Did you cover that? What are some of the strategies? You got 1 minute.
Yeah, I think the 1031 strategies is everybody, I think, was under the mindset of 1031 and defer everything. But I think there's a small opportunity to, sell some each year to have some capital gains so that you're paying the lowest effective tax rate. So I think some people maybe have the 1031 strategy, but I think there's some opportunity to take some cash off the table, recognize some gains each year to lower your effective rate, and then, proceed accordingly. I can see in a circumstance where if you've done 1031 on everything for 20 years and now you're sitting there facing, 30% tax rates, you're going to be in a tough position. And you're going to, do the DWI, as one of my clients say, and that's die with it. You're going to die with it. And if Biden has his estate, you could get a carryover basis. And that's like the worst scenario I have ever drawn up, is because if you're going to pass that tax burden on to your next generation now, that's a significant impact to your estate value.
Yeah, close friend of mine says you got to keep running from the tax man, and he's going to make his kids or her, I'm not going to say who it is, kids keep running from the tax man. It ought to be interesting to see how this all unfolds. Well, we're ready to get the next panel on. If you're on and I turned your video off, I'll try to turn it back on here. But Corey, Danielle, Asia, did I say it right?
You did.
Thank you. It was wonderful. This is great information. I know sometimes it feels a little bit more like continuing education than a rousing panel of 12 office people, but it's very valuable information. I think people really appreciate it. So thank you
Yeah.
all for your time on that.
And if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to any of the three of us if those, on the panel or on the Zoom. If
Yep.
they have any questions, we're happy to answer or provide our insights. So
Likewise,
thanks,
and if you
Todd.
can find me, I'll pass it along to this team and make sure that your questions get answered. Or if you want the slide deck, send it to me. I'll
Perfect.
send it to them. I'll handle you
All right.
from Florida.
Thanks, Todd.
If they
Thanks,
have
Todd.
internet down there, I don't know. Okay, here we go. Next panel, Jeff Gears, jump on. There we go. There's Deanne. Elizabeth. All right.
Hello.
We're cooking with gas.
We are.
There we go. Oh, and then we lost one. No, we're good.
Janice.
Where's Janice? I see. Okay.
Sounds
She's here.
working
There
okay,
we go.
Todd?
Golden.
All right.
Happy Friday. How are y'all doing?
Happy Friday. Doing well. It's been
Good.
a great summit so far. Really enjoyed the previous panels.
Yeah, that first panel was a hoot, huh? We haven't had 12 on a panel before, and I would say it was successful.
It was very successful.
So looking forward to doing that again soon. Oh, you know what? Let's just get this over with and get back together live. That's much more fun. Okay.
I know.
Well, I'll let you take it off. You've got as much time as you need. I'm recording this, putting it on YouTube. So if you go overtime and somebody has to log off and miss it, it's okay. You can go back and watch it later. So take it away. I'll be here in the background again if you need anything. Try to ask some questions in the chat room. So keep an eye on that. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Well, hello, everyone. I'd like to start out. I'll be your moderator today as we look at how COVID-19 has impacted tenant improvements. I'm Deanne Erpelding. I'm a principal with Nelson, and I am a regional leader for both our Central and West regions. I'm very excited to introduce our panel speakers today. But before doing that, I want to walk the group through kind of what today is going to look like with our time together. We're probably going to end at about 10 to 11, so we can save the last 10 minutes for any questions, and you can put those in the chat room, and feel free if there's questions throughout the presentation. I'll be monitoring the chat room and we can kind of answer them as they go as well. As we look at tenant improvements, we feel it's very important with the office design is to kind of take you through 3 segments, really looking at the new expectations of the workforce and what a tenant is going to be looking for, and what we see as shifting in overall workplace strategies, and really what the role of the office is going to be, and then how that is going to impact tenant improvements, and then ending with our insights on the future and how we feel the future is going to be shaped related to office design with some long-term impacts that we feel are here potentially to stay. So, excited to introduce our experts today. I'd like to start out with Janice Carleen Linster. Hello, Janice. Janice is a principal and regional workplace leader at DLR Group. She is a certified interior designer with 30+ years of experience and is extremely passionate about the big picture. Janice guides clients and project teams in articulating aspirations and inspiring the development of truly innovative design and strategy solutions. So welcome, Janice. Next up, I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Laurie. Elizabeth is a certified interior designer at PlanForce with more than 10 years of professional experience. Her practice is focused on tenant improvements and actually helping businesses create spaces that truly foster employee engagement and workplace culture. So welcome, Elizabeth. And rounding out our panel, would like to inviting you to the table, Jeff. Would like to introduce Jeff Gears. Jeff is a licensed architect and a LEED accredited professional. He is Vice President of Architecture at BDH. And really, regardless of project scope, size, budget, or timeline, Jeff's primary goal is to truly exceed his clients' expectations and is very, very passionate about creating unique experiences. So welcome, everybody. As we kick this off, we know that work life, truly has been disrupted, and business as usual is really a thing of the past. Workplaces have steadily become more mobile. The boundaries between physical in or out of office are really collapsing. existing mega trends are accelerating, and we're witnessing just truly a dramatic shift in employee expectations right now. And ultimately, lessons from this large scale work from home experiment, we know are going to have a lasting effect on the way work gets done and really the role offices will play. And now more than ever, workplaces must truly evolve like a living ecosystem. So we're really excited to kind of walk you through these 3 segments. And as we look to the future and what this all means and how it impacts experiences, space, workflow, everything, we'd like to just start out with the expectations of the workforce. I mean, really getting to the root of what we're seeing. The pandemic has forced the adoption of new ways of working. Organizations must reimagine their work and role of the offices, really in creating safe, productive, and enjoyable experiences. I'd like to start out with you, Janice. What are you seeing and hearing from your clients around expectations of their workforce?
Sure. Thank you, Deanne. And thank you to the Real Estate Journal for organizing the panel. I enjoyed the panel discussion this morning, and I hope that as we're talking, we're kind of weaving back and forth information and kind of taking off on that dialogue. So answering that question, what are we hearing from our clients? And I think what I want to clarify is we're looking longer term. I think we heard a lot of good discussion this morning about some of the short term and reactions, and they will absolutely fuel the long-term mindset. But we're trying to imagine a time and a place when we're not responding to COVID statistics on the hour. Maybe that's 18 months, maybe that's 2 years out, when we're really looking at what are some of the long-term impacts from what we have been through and what we've seen. And I will say this, there really isn't, we've had conversations, myself, my colleagues around the country, we've had conversations with many different businesses on a weekly basis. We've created surveys, and we've done some great surveys to gather data. And I have to admit, I really thought when we started this process that we would see information coming back and fitting into some nice clean buckets. Legal industry looks like this, and the tech industry looks like this. And it really hasn't turned out that way. There are so many variables that businesses start with. The information that we've received, there has been consistencies, and there has been a lot of variables as well. So I think the starting point for any business factors into that, whether they have a very strong culture, the size of the business, whether or not they are densely populated or were densely populated pre-COVID, whether or not they have more of a preponderance of private offices. So again, I think there are many different variables that have affected the responses that we hear and that we receive. We have clients who are looking and are very anxious to get all of their employees back in the office. Again, very strong cultural components. We have clients and businesses that we work with who have already imagined that maybe a greater percentage of their workforce will work remote. And I would say across the board, if a business does not have to push the start button, at this moment in time, it's really more assessing scenarios and variables and looking and sort of planning for what might happen in the future, but not taking any big, strong action today in terms of a whole retrofit for their offices. So there are a number of things that we've seen as consistencies, and I think we are learning from our work from home mode. We're learning sort of what are the pros, what are the cons, and those are some of the patterns that will inform what we do in the future. So through our surveys and through our conversations, I think the things that we're hearing that maybe have been on the positive side, again, that will influence our workforce and schedules in the future are greater flexibility. People are appreciating the greater flexibility. They're appreciating the savings on commute time, not having to travel in the morning, not having to travel home at night. And then I think we also look at, we also break down what we all do on a daily basis. We have researchers who capture our thinking and task in sort of categories, things like hard focus, concentration, soft focus, interactive dialogue. And in our surveying, what we've learned is that the majority of individuals who are working at home, and I say majority because there are plenty of individuals who have kids running around in the background, dogs barking, maybe they work in an efficiency apartment, but the majority of individuals feel that they can perform focused tasks better at home than in the work environment. So again, that factors into what we do when we come back to work. There are a number of things, obviously, in this mode of our distributed workforce that are missing. And again, these are consistencies across the board, no matter what type of business that we talk to. There's commonality in terms of what we're not getting in this mode that, again, will drive what we do in the future. The first thing is socialization. Clearly, it's a lot different communicating in this two-dimensional mode than it is in a three-dimensional mode. Collaboration, collaboration and being able to work with your teams on solving problems, on getting together, and the FaceTime, being able to partner with each other and dialogue. And then very importantly is the mentoring and teaching and training, especially for new employees and employees at a younger level. I know I can speak from firsthand experience. It's not easy to train an intern over the telephone. So again, FaceTime is something that's missing. So again, these are just a number of reasons why we'll want to come back to the office, but maybe not to the extent we were. So if we were full-time resident workers, maybe we won't come back 5 days a week, and maybe we won't come back between hours 8 and 5, but there are reasons why we want to come back to a community of work. So then we look at these, the rationale, we look at what I refer to as the likelihood of a split shift, or maybe not in the office 40 hours. And then as we've been talking to our clients about what is next, how do we kind of anticipate the future? As a result of this, if we think that when you get to the point of considering that maybe there are some employees who aren't in the office, maybe they're in the office 50%, so now the dialogue turns to, well, would we consider things like desk sharing and hoteling? Would we consider taking a piece of our population and designating them as remote workers? If it's a business that is maybe more, has more preponderance of private offices, we've been having conversations around, even in the legal industry, around, well, is it, if we're not in as much, and even in the legal industry, while a lot of the work is autonomous, they believe there's absolute rationale for getting back in, and the teaching and mentoring is a very big component of that. But we've had conversations around, well, are the offices smaller? Are they the same size? And would some firms are considering, would we ever go to an office sharing mode? And we can't forget that if we look at, for businesses who are designating a portion of their population as remote workers, then we have to factor in, well, do we need to think of a work from home toolkit, right? And OSHA certainly stepped in on that as well. So then just a few other general things that I'll kind of lay on the line that we've been, again, having dialogue with our clients on. And very importantly, if we imagine that we have a choice, we wake up in the morning, we can choose, do I go to the office today or do I stay at home and work in my jammies? What we have to consider is, what does the workplace have to offer us? So if we think that we're going to do more of that interactive and social work at the office, then our office environments have to be designed around that. Or if I come into the office for a meeting, but I have to take a Zoom call, and I think the technology of conference calls and Zoom calls will absolutely be a part of our future, then we need spaces where I can get up from my wide open benching station and run into a private space to take that call. So again, we need to really, more than ever, we've always been.
Oh, I was going to say, Janice, it's really interesting when you're talking about just looking at, pure usage and typography of space and just the dynamic. What do you do if you have a segment of the workforce that perhaps throughout all of this, as part of the strategy, a decision that they'll just be 100% remote, but they're still interfacing with people who are physically in the office? And then how does space types change? Are we going to be doing Zoom rooms, or, what does that look like?
Again, again, the design around choice isn't a new concept. just going to take on much more significant meetings. So when you're in an office environment, because throughout the day, any one of us could be breaking up our day with different tasks. Part of our day might be very concentrated work. Part of our day might be very interactive work or soft focus work where we can put some music on in the background. So it's about designing the office environment for choice. And now it's going to be, I think, looking more at again, that notion of flexibility. You're very right. We need spaces if we're going to draw people back to the office because there's a purpose for being there, because we want to be collaborative and interactive. But I also, at some point in the day, have to run and grab a conference call. Yes, absolutely. We're going to need spaces that accommodate all those different types of work modes. If that makes sense. And I'll just add maybe one or two comments. Oh, just, other couple of things, Deanne, that we've been really having conversation on is the health and wellness component. The fact that we've looked at greater air filtration and circulation, greater sanitization, that's not going to go away. We're not going to step back and say, oh, I guess I'll be okay with okay air quality. So there's going to be a continued focus on that. Certainly the notion of resiliency and flexibility, and that's not just in the design of our workplaces, but it's how we work. And then the last category I'll mention is I think there's going to be, and this is really because technology has allowed us to do this to a greater extent, is really a focus on more performance-based design. So if we can employ, and we are now, and we have been, and we can employ sensors that track data on air quality and acoustics and occupancy, it will be that we'll talk, technology certainly a bit later, but it will be the analyzing that data that will allow us to design an environment around behavior or maybe even manipulate behavior in an environment, if that makes sense.
And continue to track it. So as you're getting that real-time data and analytics and really understanding how it's effective or ineffective and monitoring it, when you go back to the agility and the flexibility, it's kind of fact-based design where you can kind of take the analytics and then truly understand, how do you need to pivot? How do we make this more effective? It's really fascinating. I'd love to hear from you, Elizabeth. As Janice was mentioning, right now kind of doing a lot of these scenario plans, not really necessarily activating them yet, but looking at the scenarios. Would love to hear from you. What are you seeing with clients you're working with? One, around the expectations on where they see the workforce will be in the future, and then what you're maybe actively doing right now to respond to that.
I think that what a lot of what Janice is talking about is what we're seeing as well. And I think that was talked about a lot in the first panel too, that a lot of clients are kind of in that wait and see mode, and they're kind of projecting beyond the pandemic and anticipating a return to kind of a normal environment. But I do think that hybrid work from home, work from the office is really going to be just a bigger part of our jobs as designers on figuring out how spaces work. And it was talked a little bit about the percentage of people that are going to come into the office and the percentage that are going to work from home, and how do you design the space to accommodate those. And so whether that means benching or hoteling, and how do we keep that, clean with our kind of COVID concerns about wellness. And so I think that's going to be a bigger part of what we're talking about in the future. But I'm also hearing from a lot of people that they're really excited to get back into the office, and they do enjoy the flexibility, but they miss that connection with their coworkers and that spontaneous kind of creativity that happens from being in an office environment. So I think that just creating an environment that's more enticing to employees is just going to be a bigger part of our job, and making the office really a destination that everyone wants to come to as well.
That therein lies the thing, when we look at behavioral shifts and, what's going to be here to stay, it's going back. Okay, we know we're going to need physical space, but at the end of the day, Jeff, I'd love to hear from you initially on this next topic. What do we need to do? What are going to be the key drivers? And if it's related to dynamic design or a draw to truly get people back to the office, what do you feel design solutions and drivers to make that happen?
Sure. First of all, I have to ask, I've been having some technology issues, so can you hear me?
We sure can.
Awesome. Obviously I think if we're all aware, there's a lot of news right now that there's this vaccine that might be coming out. And, but I think that as we're thinking about the future, specifically with office space, the scars that we've experienced through this pandemic are not going to go away anytime soon, regardless of if COVID is managed in a way that we can get back to a quote unquote normal life. I think there's going to be concerns about just well-being in general. So I think the number one factor that when I'm talking to clients is just the comfort and safety of their employees. For so long, it had been about employee retention and creating environments and spaces for productivity and that to attract talent. And I think that's still going to be at the forefront, but it's going to be also about this notion of their comfort and safety. And what does that mean? And we can take obviously it's going to work a lot about the office culture in terms of what is their business model. For so long we've been pushing technology for the idea of could we work remote? Well, now guess what? We didn't even have a test run. We just had trial by fire that we have to work remote. And did it work? Sure. Is it what we want? I don't know. I think that's up to each office in determining their success and their productivity and the culture that they want. So I think that's number one, is really understanding their business, what they need. And number two is how does that play with how their employees and their safety and things to consider aside from the design. I mean, we can talk about separation of spaces and social distancing and things of, where do conference rooms get located, but some other bigger questions are going to be, where is their actual physical office going to be located? Are they going to be wanting things like their own front door so that they don't have shared amenity spaces, things that they feel that they're more in control over of, if I'm leasing a space and I have my own cleaning crew, I can trust that, but what's going on next door? I don't know. So there's going to be these things that I think are going to be top of mind, very similar to the adversities that we went through with the recession and 9/11, and we reacted to those. I think we're going to be reacting in a very similar way, even if a vaccine is viable and it becomes real in the hopefully not too distant future, and we're not really dealing with the day in, day out concern of COVID. But I think the scars are going to be there, and we're going to remember that.
Mm-hmm. Do you, going to kind of the next element, if we're looking at some of these foundational shifts and looking at really, and there are some workers, in all of this work from home experiment, depending on what business you're in, yeah, you might be remote, but we also have essential workers. And some of those essential workers they didn't have the option to work remote. They're in the office, but they're still faced with all the dynamics of if they have children that are in remote learning and then just trying to juggle all of that. If we kind of look at the evolution of that, maybe from March or whenever, and we have people still in the office around retrofitting the existing workplace environments, what sort of shifts have you seen in that? And then how is that being in preparation when the full force is back with kind of the long-term impacts of the design? And ultimately it's looking at square footage. If we see a big shift, with the way this is going to change, what is that going to translate into space?
Sure.
I'd love to hear kind of the immediate right now on the retrofit long-term.
Sure. I think, what I'm seeing a lot of, and I can speak not only with clients, but also internally in our office, is we went to a shift work. We're not having the whole staff at the office at the same time. And it's interesting for me because I've had a couple clients where they're going through a very similar process, and their initial kind of knee-jerk reaction is, hey, moving forward, a portion of my staff could be remote. Maybe they're not remote full-time, maybe we do shift work, but doesn't that mean we need less square footage? And it's interesting to think about that. Well, no, you don't, unless you're in a culture where individuals are okay sharing workstations. If they're okay that, on Monday and Wednesday, I'm in a workstation and then it gets cleaned, and on Tuesday and Thursday, somebody else comes in. If your culture is acceptable to that, that's one thing, but I'm going to guess the vast majority of people are not going to be overly comfortable with that. So even if you're in a shift work or working remote policy, with the idea that people can come back to work, square footage isn't really going to be able to be reduced in that capacity, from what I'm experiencing. And that's one of the things that I'm advertising to clients, because I think a lot of them are at this position where obviously business has been affected. Is there opportunity to cut costs? Could we, a lot of people are at that point in their lease where they're thinking about, do we extend, do we renew, what do we want to do? And do we need this much space? I mean, I'm being asked this quite a bit. What is the COVID grossing factor, right? Do I need 75% of the space, or do I need 150% of the space? And again, the answer is we don't know. I mean, it's all about your culture and it's about your needs and wants. But at the end of the day, I would say, be very cautious about the idea that you're going to be able to reduce square footage just because I don't think that's the answer.
No, and it's interesting that you say that. Literally just yesterday heard Verizon in Chicago, 2 full floors, and they announced that they will be 100% remote, and they're going to now go to a 5,000 square foot sort of experience center. So it's still that space where employees can come, they can bring clients, but they're going from 2 full floors down to 5,000 square feet. Now, personally, I don't think that that's sustainable. When you look at innovation and culture and come together, going from 2 full floors down to 5,000 and just the dynamics of all of that. But leading into all of this, it's really, now's the time, for the audience that's on this call, when you're working with your clients, it's a perfect opportunity to really kind of take a pause and look at your workplace strategy. Like really look at, and you may not have all the answers, but really looking through the whole strategic point of view on how work is getting done, how businesses have shifted, and how space still needs to support that. So I'd love to start out with you, Janice. Leading workplace for the region at DLR, when we look to workplace strategy, and we were doing this before COVID, but here we are in this moment, would love to see where you're going with your clients around kind of setting the strategy so we're prepared. Oh, I think you're on mute. That's okay. No worries.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. So as I commented earlier, I think there's not a one-size-fits-all strategy, and Jeff alluded to this as well. We're seeing different things with different businesses, so it's kind of getting together with them. We go through scenario planning. We talk about what is changing in their business. I think when your example of a company deciding to give up 2 floors of real estate and pocket back down to 5,000 square feet, that's not because of COVID. No. There has to be business reasons behind that. So again, I think it's really looking at the business strategy first. Absolutely, there are going to be fundamental shifts and behaviors that carry forward. We can't deny that. I was reading, and this kind of reminded me of this when I was listening to the panelists this morning. I was reading an article the other day on behavioral change. And I think it said it takes 66 days for us to adopt the behavior that we just do automatically. Well, for most of us, if we're either working at home or working in a hybrid situation, and it will be a good year, probably more than that, really more than that. By the time that we even start talking about getting back to a new normal, and there will be behavioral shifts that we take with us into the future. And so I think another conversation that we're having is around change management, meaning, we have to be very sensitive to, and this is even in this transition period, we're not going to flip a switch from the point we're at today to this kind of imaginative world, and it will happen, of a post-COVID work environment. So even that transitional period, we need to think about how we ease people back into work. So that, again, is part of the conversation that we're having. And the last thing that I'll mention, I think, to really engagement of an employee population, we have formulated surveys. They get obviously customized for each client, but asking, especially if you're a bigger company, asking your employee base, what's going on, and part of it has to be about we have to respect that we're all human beings and we're designing an office environment around human beings, but tapping into the mindset of individuals, and again, really looking at that long-term response has been important as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. When you look at all of that, it almost becomes, going back to kind of this living ecosystem. And when you look at the workplace and the workforce, it's really kind of tying back to a holistic lifestyle, because the lines are so blurred between residential and office, and that place of work is not going to be kind of a singular place of work. And even when you are in the physical place of work, there's just going to be different modes of working, different space types. I'd love to ask the panel, and starting with you, Elizabeth, when we look at all of this and we're talking about office design and end users, but for looking at an asset type and making your choice of location, how can landlords be responding, to provide infrastructure in the building to kind of tie into these new workplace strategies that might extend beyond their rentable area? Elizabeth, can you start us off with that one?
Yeah, so I think, at a minimum, we've got the COVID preparedness that everyone's talked about, and making sure that your buildings are safe. I think it's going forward, it's going to be really interesting. This was mentioned a little bit on the first panel about what's going to happen locally with our real estate market. So are we going to see increased interest and competition in the suburban market just because those buildings will be easier to navigate with COVID, with the single entry and lack of kind of common spaces that Jeff mentioned? So that'll be interesting. For current buildings, I think we're seeing a lot of requests for spec suites. And so clients are really challenged during this time. This has been a big upheaval, working from home and changing your working environment. And so they want those spaces that are complete and designed, and they don't really have to think about it. And I really see that as something that's going to continue into the future as well.
Very good. Jeff, can you provide some commentary on that? I'd love each of you to kind of speak to this, just when you're working with your clients and they're making a choice on real estate, what really can be driving these tenants to these assets, and even types of amenities that potentially could change. Oh, you're on mute, Jeff. That's okay.
You'd think you would be used to this by now, right? Sorry.
No worries.
It is interesting to me because I think some of the clients I've been working with, they are much more proactively thinking about location than they may have in the past. I think historically it was, well, this is where we've been located and this is where we're going to be located, and people are going to have to, this is kind of what they come to expect. Where, and I don't necessarily know if it's not specifically just because of COVID, but I would say it's kind of the pot is being stirred, in terms of really meeting, how do I meet my employees' needs? And, using just analytics of where are they located and who wants to drive. And, even to the point where you're doing programming and you're understanding, what is the workforce going to be? How many people are going to be remote versus how many people are going to be in office? And if you actually look at, that spread on a map and understand, like, gosh, maybe we should consider relocating because, the vast majority of people who are coming into the office are maybe not located in a certain area. So there's a lot more that's going into that consideration than I had experienced previously.
Do you think that, are any of your clients looking at kind of the duality of that, where maybe they'd have different satellite locations to kind of meet the multifaceted demands of the workforce? If there's kind of, depending on where they're coming from, have you seen any of that?
I guess I haven't.
Okay.
I think the conversations have been more of, again, it is always going to be about square footage and, what are they paying? What does their lease look like? But then it's the internal culture of, well, can we be more remote, or can we be more flexible? Or, that was obviously a conversation that has been going on for a long time, pre-COVID, obviously. But now with this, I think the shift has really come back to, and again, and I mentioned this earlier, I think it's people are understanding, for a long time, there was this, the carrot dangle in front of, hey, we have this remote policy where you can work, X amount of hours remote. And that was a perk for a lot of employees. Now it's like, well, this is reality. This is what we're doing, and it's not going to go away. But I think the perk is going to change to, hey, do I actually have a workplace? Not saying that's going to be for every environment and every culture, but certainly for a lot of office and a lot of staff and employees, this notion, I think you brought it up earlier, of everything's kind of mixed together even more than it had been before. I'm speaking to this group right now, sitting from my kitchen, and this is where I've had the majority of my phone calls over the last 9 months. And there's something to be said about location. And when you're doing things like even recalling conversations that you've had with people, like, hey, remember that we had that meeting and we were talking about, and we're in that conference room, or, wherever we might have been. Now it's, hey, remember that conversation? It was another one that I had in my kitchen.
Time definitely moves differently right now.
It does. And so I think, there is something to be said about productivity. Janice had spoke about that earlier, but, and I think that's extremely valid, but also I think it's thinking about the mental well-being of employees and this idea of social isolation. And I think people are going to be craving an opportunity just to escape a little bit from their personal home life back into a work life. And what does that mean? And I think that's what employers are actually considering a lot more than they had been before. Hence, what's the best location for my staff?
Janice, were you going to say something? To comment
Well,
on
well,
what
I
you're
mean,
seeing?
you know, maybe just to add a little bit. I think you would ask whether or not clients are considering at this moment in time going elsewhere, right? And I think I've had conversations with clients, and I think at this moment of time, because they're experiencing maybe some frustration, maybe some fear, you know, if they had to pull the trigger at this very moment, they might look at someplace else. But I think they're also, this is a great question to look at from the perspective of short term and then long term again. There was a reason that we had, you know, our downtown, as downtown's plural, and certain suburban areas have been growing as a community of working environments. We'll get there again. It's not going to be in 3 months, but we'll get there again. So again, it's important to have a long-term perspective on this, and that's where I think most of our clients are sitting at this moment. Again, as I said earlier, if you don't have to press the go button right now, let's look at the scenarios and plan for that. The other thing you would ask the question about, you know, what should landlords be anticipating? I think that the benchmark for clean indoor air quality and, you know, as Jeff said, healthy environments is a benchmark that we're not going to back off on. The other thing that I was sitting in a presentation the other day on our higher education group and looking at the Gen Z, you know, so they're the individuals first coming into our workforce right now and still in the higher education institutions, and really looking at the whole topic of inclusivity. And if we're looking at designing in public areas of higher education institutions, whether it's gender neutral restrooms, locker rooms, etc., that is something else that as landlords look at the multi-tenant aspect of their amenity centers, that notion of that next generation, both from a technology standpoint as well as an inclusivity standpoint, is something that should definitely be on the radar.
I'd like to go back to the technology, because we mentioned that, and technology obviously can be used, you know, through orchestrating change management and et cetera. But as we look at kind of these, you know, prop tech companies have been out, and, you know, whether it's the landlord making the investment to bring that into the asset, or using, you know, kind of an IWMS sort of platform to track density, to track the story around, you know, indoor air quality, when was the space last cleaned, you know, kind of intrinsically everything that's happening with space. What are you doing with your clients right now, and have they immediately implemented any of that, or is that in one of the scenario modes as they look to the future?
Do you want me to take that one, Deanna?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay. Well, I guess to respond to your question specifically on the data analytics and data tracking. And again, to your point, this was a service that we were offering pre-COVID, but it actually has been accelerated during this time. And you know, when you're looking at tracking information, the most important part of that is, what do you do with it, right?
Yeah.
So it's really the data analytics side of it. So we have been tracking information on air quality, and like I said before, lighting and acoustics. And for instance, you can track occupancy, and a corporate campus could look at, you know, well, where are people sitting in these collaborative areas, and which are most successful, and where are people not going? And that helps to inform how we, again, design space in the future. But what we've seen accelerated from a technology standpoint in the past few months is obviously preparing for that side of it, the occupancy side of it, but it's the indoor air quality side of it. We have, it's amazing when I speak to my engineers, just the technology that has grown in the last 6 months, and different levels of data tracking. And again, it's now to the point where we don't know that it's Deanne in that room. We just know that it's somebody in that space. Or we have a client, and they can pop up on their iPhones in the morning, and they can know what the air quality is in any environment. They can know whether or not that conference room has been cleaned and isn't available, or how long that line at the food service counter is, and should they go to that line. So again, that absolutely is the future. That is technology that is here, that we're just kind of on the cusp of really utilizing. So it's how we take that, how we analyze it. And then obviously, I think you made the point earlier about making sure that we're always coming back to an environment should never be looked at as stagnant. This morning I heard it, I've heard it from this panel, that comment on flexibility and resiliency. And we need to look at our environments, and I'll use your word, as a living environment.
Yeah.
And it's okay to think that we're going to implement something, and then we kind of see how the puzzle pieces and how it's being used, and then we might tweak it. We might make some changes. Or if you're a big company, the next time you do, Office B, you're going to implement what you learned from the last installation. So I do think that that side of it is it will be very, very something that we're going to see and need to from a performance-based design standpoint.
Absolutely. And it definitely provides kind of the added assurance and insurance where, from a human psychology component to it, just understanding, being informed, when you're informed, you're less anxious, you understand it, et cetera, and really looking at all of this, when we look at socioeconomic shifts, a renewed focus, because flexibility and collaboration, I mean, we've been designing for that even pre all of this, but kind of a renewed focus and perhaps a shift in focus around the flexibility, resiliency, engagement with the community. How do you truly foster culture, which obviously right now in a virtual platform, how do you build culture virtually? It'll be interesting to see if there's any fundamental shifts beyond kind of the bricks and mortar design, but just it's intrinsic to the design, but if there's different platforms or programs that employers are implementing for their employee base that can roll up to the ecosystem of the design, but it's kind of those intangible items that kind of roll up. If it's, you just look at the mental state and the wherewithal, are we going to be having different virtual amenities where people, there's a question coming in, where people can, they have other offers beyond just the physical space, and that either the employer is offering that or assets can. I do want to take this question that just came in. What should landlords be doing to their spaces in advance to attract tenants? So that's a great question by Brock. Thank you, Brock. That's a great question. We look at this right now, and yeah, maybe not everybody's back, and some assets have maybe 5% occupancy with people in the building right now, but we do know that people will be going back. So Elizabeth, maybe we'll start with you, and I'd like the whole panel to answer this one to offer perspective. What can landlords be doing right now to prepare for that, to attract these new tenants?
Yeah, I think that, a safe building is most important. So we talked a little about indoor air quality. How can we update that and make sure that that's meeting current COVID standards, the cleanliness aspect, and then just, I think, attracting new tenants, like I was talking about, with creating spaces maybe that are finished or complete for those tenants, spec suites, spaces that are just, more designed and more flexible. And in the spec suites that we have been doing, we're just doing a lot more kind of furniture pieces and furniture that's more flexible. I think that tenants are wanting to see just how spaces can be adapted, used right now with a lower number of occupants. And then in the future, when we go back to more people in the office, they can be easily adapted for a larger population that are working in office.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, what are your perspectives on that? Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the indoor air quality is going to be a big question, but that's depending on the building and depending on kind of the history of what's going on there, that could be a really big challenge for some building owners to deal with. I think what they may need to be prepared to is to have a better understanding of who all the tenants are, so as people are coming into spaces, I think they're going to be much more conscious of who are their neighbors, what's going on, what is their, I mean, obviously there's things that they can't divulge, but I think there's going to be more of a commonality of kind of what am I getting into? And the other thing I would say is, and I'm sure, the vast majority of people listening to this understand and already appreciate this. I think the terms of their lease are going to need to be, I don't think as many people right now, until we have a little bit more surety of what's going on, are in a comfortable position to sign these longer deals. And it's going to be, are we going to be able to be a little bit more flexible, maybe think about the TI allowances a little bit differently, to have shorter deals as we are kind of going through this interim of understanding not only what technologies are going to change and vaccines, but also our culture of our office and what people are expecting. So there's a little bit of a transition. So I think that's kind of the big thing I'm seeing is, hey, can we all kind of play ball here a little bit and be a little bit more flexible flexible and see where this goes.
Very good. Janice, do you have anything to add? Oh, you're on mute. You're on, oh, that's okay.
I would reiterate Elizabeth's comment about, the clean indoor air quality and just the cleanliness of the building. I think that's something that the landlord of multi-tenant buildings owns some responsibility for. But I think I would go back to looking at coming into the office with purpose and intention. So if in the future, again, we can decide whether or not I'm going to go into the office or work from home, there needs to be a reason to draw me back into this environment. And I think when you look at the mix of tenants in any buildings, while larger businesses and companies will be able to embed in their mix this choice-based environment, as we've been seeing now for many years, landlords have been building in amenity areas. Some aspects of those are used by all tenants. Other aspects are used by smaller tenants who cannot embed those same amenities in-house. So it's following suit and really designing around different work styles and choice-based work environment. But I think taking that a step further, and much like we're talking with businesses, is looking at how we pay attention to those environments, and because this is something that will be with us for a while, and looking at how there's inherent flexibility to divide space, to suddenly shield one area from another area, to establish some protocols that assures me that the tenant who used this room before I did, or that the landlord or that somebody took care of that space, cleaned the space, etc. So I think it's instilling maybe another level of protocols, and it's really the transparency about assuring me that all of these things are taken care of.
That's great. Thank you. Well, we have 3 minutes left, and just would like to end it with one last very question. We know that this pandemic has spurred an evolutionary leader really in the means and methods of our work. We've embraced technology and empathy in order to really create flexible, healthy work life, which we all spoke on. Would like a lightning round with each of you with just a short statement. What is your prediction as we look at this, the greatest long-term impact that will really reshape the future of office design? And we'll start with you, Jeff. You're on mute there.
Okay. I think what's going to be most evident in terms of office layout is, the conference room and areas where we are collaborating in terms of how those are laid out. I think it's going to be based on infrastructure of HVAC and safety levels and comfort levels of staff.
Wonderful. Elizabeth?
I think just a renewed focus on wellness. It was in play before the pandemic, but I think that's just really heightened it. So how do we create spaces that really address the physical and psychological health of employees, and what are some ways we can make people feel more connected and create that sense of community?
Wonderful. And Janice, we'll end with you. Your prediction.
Great, and I think great comments. I think if I was to add to that, I would probably go back to this notion of flexibility and designing for choice and purpose. But I can't help but think about a couple of comments that were brought up in the panels this morning, and we've had a lot of dialogue about this endpoint, right? When we're all feeling good about coming back into the office, but we realize that we're not going to flip a switch and go from where we are at this moment to that point. So there is this transition, this notion of today. Do we feel safe coming to work? Do we feel safe coming to downtown? I really think we all own some involvement in that short term as individuals and companies. We had and will have again, and we need to think in that way, vibrant city centers, healthy city centers, but it takes all of us, as was brought up this morning, to support the small businesses and the restaurants and to advocate for safety. And that is something that we all can be a part of that change, and that's going to be very big in this evolution.
Wonderful. Well, this is great. What we've learned today, really, it's the agility, the adaptability, and creativity are really the new workplace necessities. So with that, we are at time, and just want to thank the three of you for your expertise and insights. Todd, we'll pass it back over to
Great
you.
panel, everybody. Thank you, Deanne, Jeff, Janice, Elizabeth. Great panel. Thank you, everybody who paid attention online. A couple quick, right? I mean, 2 hours, 3 hours on a Friday. It's a grind, and thank you for doing it, but it's important information. I like
It
that
is.
all of you said it's good to see faces again, and we're going to do this live. There's no way this event isn't live next year.
You might have to find a bigger event because you may have a lot more people than the than the average. Everyone's going to be very eager to
I'm
get back
also
out.
the company CFO, and I can tell you we are very much counting on all of you wanting to get together soon. It's been a rough year, but that's okay. We're making it through. We're making the best of it. And look, we've pivoted, man. The technology we have now and the ability we have to, I should mention our YouTube channel. We're going to be at 20,000 views on our YouTube channel, and overall from our webinars, by the time we hit our forecast event on January 7th, we'll have 50,000 viewers company-wide, which is more than 2.5 times what we've ever projected. So this has all been good, but man, we miss getting together. So thank you, everybody. A shout out to our sponsors. Let me just screen share real quick. Thanks to these folks for making all that happen. And again, here's where you can find the speakers that were just on this panel or any other panel. And our YouTube channel is where you can find, oops, I'm uploading something right now, so you can't really see it. But our YouTube channel is where you can find all of our events from all around the country on all kinds of topics. So don't forget to go there and follow. What's the word for it again? Subscribe to the channel. There's so many different buttons to push, like, whatever, subscribe. I don't even understand it all, but subscribe on our YouTube channel. It'll help me. Thank you. Thank you, gang. Have a
Wonderful.
wonderful
Thank you,
weekend.
everybody.
Enjoy the nice weather in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah, have fun in Florida.
Oh my goodness, I can't wait. We're leaving in like an hour.
Thank you for the
Next time I see you, I'll have a polo on.
Thanks.